right? We're the ones advancing on Russia.
No, we're not advancing. The world is changing.
Of course we are. NATO has advanced on Russia.
The world is
This is a
changing, and
fact.
countries want to go in specific directions of their own choice. I know you don't care. You care so much about the thoughts and feelings of the Russian people, but you don't care at all about the sovereignty of all the countries that surround it. I can completely understand Putin, or even if it's true, the broader Russian perspective about what they want their place in the world to be. That doesn't mean I have to respect it or justify it morally.
Right?
Yeah, but that doesn't justify. Wait, that doesn't someone's suffering doesn't justify them becoming a monster.
They're not monsters. There we go.
Vladimir Putin is a monster.
Yourself, he's a fucking monster. No, he's the best leader Russia has had in over 100 years. America has no business in Ukraine.
It's not a question of that. That's the wrong framing. Ukraine of its own choice.
It's a question to the Russians.
Ukraine of its own choice says we want to become
Ukraine's
more.
own choice.
You're saying America and the West should respect Russia, but when you say that, what you mean is by respecting Russia, we should let them do whatever the they want in their own sphere of influence and take over and fuck over anyone they want.
Russia did not invade, or it's not going to invade Ukraine if Ukraine has a pro-Russian leadership, right? There's no
and if they don't have a pro-Russian leadership, then they do.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so Ukraine basically is your position.
G'day guys, and welcome back. Most of you know who Sargon is, but some of you may not know who Adam and Sitch are. Well, both Adam and Sitch are going to be debating Sargon. The link to their channels will be in the description.
Hey, how you doing, Sargon?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Good. What's up, man?
Oh man, it is fucking torture listening to you guys talk about this.
Is it?
Is genuine. Oh god, yeah.
Okay.
Holy shit.
Tell us.
I don't even know where to begin. Right. So on one hand, you're like, oh, the agreement was with the USSR and that's dissolved. So therefore, blah, blah, blah. And there are still no weapons in East Germany. But,
wait.
No,
I literally never said
that. Listen, right? You did say this, right?
No, I didn't.
And then, yes, you did. And
well, do you want to do 1 point at a time, or do you want to do like your
No, I'm
speech
going to lay out my position. Then you
can lay out your position.
And so you say, okay, fine. On paper, theoretically, in a thin sense, the USSR was what that was. No, that's legalistically. But then later on, you were like, oh, as if NATO's just going to disband because Russia isn't the same country. It's like, oh, there we go. Now, I agree with that. That's the real meat of the thing. That's the real way to look at it. But then you can't have it both ways. So if it was really Russia running the USSR, which it was, obviously, then the agreement with the USSR was really with Russia. And so the Russians suddenly look more justified in saying, well, hang on, you broke this agreement not to continue expanding NATO to our border. Right. And it's things like this. It's inconsistencies like this that basically belie the assumptions you guys approach this with. And I suppose the question I have to begin with then is Russia and the Russian state that is supported by the Russian people worthy of respect?
Wait, repeat the last thing you just said.
Is Russia, the state and the people who uphold it, worthy of respect? Okay.
So regarding the NATO promise, you're talking about the promise to not move east thing, I assume, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my position, I've heard this position. My position was not, oh, that agreement was made with the USSR and the USSR doesn't exist anymore, so therefore we can throw it away. That was never my position. My position was what Gorbachev said himself, that the agreement was not about expanding NATO to encompass countries to the east, because at the time that the agreement was made, there were no countries to the east. All those countries were still part of the Soviet Union, which hadn't fallen yet. The agreement was only
Putin
about...
said the same thing with Bush, didn't he?
The agreement was only about... Gorbachev, who agreed to this and said it himself, was only about putting military bases in East Germany once the USSR pulled out of it. And he says himself that US and that NATO fulfilled their end of the bargain in that agreement. And I'm not 100% sure on this. I don't know if you know, if you're knowledgeable in this. I thought that until Russia invaded Crimea in 2014, that basically there wasn't really NATO forces even pushing into the countries that had been expanded to NATO.
No, as I understand it, military resources are being put into Poland, like missiles and things like this. But I'm no great expert. But Putin also did say to Bush, again, and Bush apparently looked him in the eye and promised him, right? And so you've got this continuity of broken promises from America.
Bush promised him what?
That he wouldn't expand NATO east.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that promise, but
okay, well, look it up.
Okay, let's look it up. Does Putin suck Bush? Okay, here we are. Let's have a look-see. Of course, our fact checkers. I never believed these things. Ever since 2016, fact checkers, I just don't believe them. So it says here, mostly false, which probably means it's true. Let's have a look. Not shift 1 inch eastward. Let's go and have a closer look. What do we got here? 1990. Not 1 inch eastward. So I'm reading this as it's true. Problem with these fact checkers is, I'll give you an example. There was a crate of ballots thrown out, caught on camera. Fact check. False. The ballots were not in a crate. They were in a plastic container, and that's how they twist shit. So let's get back to the debate. I'm just going to cut in on myself before we go back to the debate, because I'm not saying Sitch is wrong. Not at all. Let's replay Sitch's position.
Regarding the NATO promise, you're talking about the promise to not move east thing, I assume, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my position, I've heard this position. My position was not, oh, that agreement was made with the USSR and the USSR doesn't exist anymore, so therefore we can throw it away. That was never my position. My position was what Gorbachev said himself, that the agreement was not about expanding NATO to encompass countries to the east, because at the time that the agreement was made, there were no countries to the east. All those countries were still part of the Soviet Union, which hadn't fallen yet.
Now, the reason I replay this, and I don't cut out what I did earlier with the Mission Impossible music, is to show you that even I can overlook things when looking for the facts. I mean, in the same conversation, we heard Sargon say that Bush promised, and look it up.
And Bush apparently looked him in the eye and promised him, right? And so you've got this continuity of broken promises from America.
Bush promised him what?
That he wouldn't expand NATO east.
So with that in mind, you look it up, and you're looking for the keywords, of course, Bush and don't move east. And when you find it, a lot of the times the fact checkers aren't actually accurate. But in this case, there is a bit of nuance. So let's read from Russia Beyond. This was sent to me by Sitch. Russia Beyond the headline says, one of the key issues that has arisen in connection with the events in Ukraine is NATO expansion into the east. Do you get the feeling that your Western partners lied to you when they were developing their future plans in Eastern Europe? Why didn't you insist that the promises made to you, particularly US Secretary of State James Baker's promise that NATO would not expand into the East, be legally encoded? I will quote Baker, "NATO will not move 1 inch further east." Mikhail Gorbachev said, "The topic of NATO expansion," in quotes, "was not discussed at all, and it wasn't brought up in those years. I say this with full responsibility. Not a single Eastern European country raised the issue, not even after the Warsaw Pact ceased to exist in 1991. Western leaders didn't bring it up either. Another issue we brought up was discussed, making sure that NATO's military structures would not advance and that additional armed forces from the alliance would not be deployed on the territory of the then GDR after German reunification." Barker's statement, mentioned in your question, was made in that context. Kull and German Vice-Chancellor Hans-Dietrich Genscher talked about it. Everything that could have been and needed to be done to solidify that political obligation was done and fulfilled. The agreement on a final settlement with Germany said that no new military structures would be created in the eastern part of the country. No additional troops would be deployed. No weapons of mass destruction would be placed there. It has been observed all these years, so don't portray Gorbachev and the then Soviet authorities as naive people who were wrapped around the West's finger. If there was naivety, it was later when the issue arose. Russia at first did not object. The decision for the US and its allies to expand NATO into the East was decisively made in 1993. I called this a big mistake from the very beginning. It was definitely a violation of the spirit of the statements and assurances made to us in 1990 with regards to Germany. They were legally enshrined and are being observed. All right, cunts, all right, calm down. We'll get back to the debate. I know you're just wanting the simple version. The simple version is the 1-inch eastward line was just referring to moving NATO bases eastward in Germany after the reunification. No one was talking about other countries, which is what Sitch said. But then Sargon said Bush made the promise too, but Bush didn't make this promise. Bush did a joint declaration on a new strategic relationship between the United States of America and the Russian Federation. You can look that up yourself. Now, over the years, Russia believes that there was promises made and promises broken. So that's their narrative, and let's just say, for argument's sake, there was promises broken. At this point, does it matter? Russia has its reasons for invading, and that's what they believe. So sorry to hold you up. Let's get back to the debate.
This is something Putin said. Now, I don't know, because, and I again, this is why I really, it's your framing on Russia that I can only assume comes from you being American, right? Because of the Cold War and because of the way your politicians talk, right? It's insufferable. And it gives you this perspective on Russia that I think is honestly kind of unfair, right? I've never been to Russia. I only know like 2 Russians.
I've been to Russia.
Good for you. Right?
I'm of Russian descent, Sargon. It's in my blood.
I believe it.
What is that supposed to be?
Why'd you bring it up?
Jeez.
I have no interest in Russia, right? I've never been on Russia Today. I don't care. The only time Russia ever enters into my daily life is when there's an American politician saying Russia hacked the elections, right? That's the only time until now, obviously. But the thing I really want to talk to you about is, again, does Russia deserve any respect? Is it a legitimate country? Do they have a right to exist?
Well, I mean, what do you mean by, I don't think the country should be destroyed and the people killed. But
Take
I don't
it however
think,
you interpret.
Yeah, but I don't think Putin should be respected in terms of, I don't think Putin's government is legitimate.
According to what standard?
I don't think that autocracies where a dictator just seizes power and then just fucks over the rest of their country is worthy of respect.
Yeah, but you said earlier that Putin didn't just seize power. He was granted it. He was passed it by Gorbachev.
Yeah, how did Gorbachev become leader of Russia?
What standard are you using?
The standard of believing in Western liberal democracy.
Right. Russia is Russia.
I know it. They don't believe in Western liberal democracy.
No, it's not that they don't believe in it. It's that if I were to characterize countries, right, in short, pithy phrases, right, I would say England is the Shire, right? I would say France is up its own arse with its own greatness. I'd say Germany is secretly a giant danger to the entire world, right?
Okay.
And the Germans know this.
As they always have been. Yeah.
I would say America was probably God's chosen land.
Yes.
Right? You've been gifted all of the best of all things, right? And if I would characterize Russia, I would call it a land of suffering.
Okay, I would agree with all this.
Right.
Keep going.
Okay. So why judge them by the God-given standards of America? That's like saying a short person shit at basketball because they can't dunk.
Here, basically.
Right? No, it's true. Right? For the standards of Russia, Putin is not a terrible leader.
I'm not blaming
in living
the people,
memory.
Though.
They've had much worse leaders.
Of course, they were under fucking communists for 60-70 years.
But I mean, you've probably got some sort of 120-year-old babushka somewhere in Siberia who can remember the weak Tsar, right?
Right. I hope not.
You are acting as if Russia should land on its feet with English institutions like America did. Right? It can't happen. It can't be done.
Okay, hold on.
Hang on. No, they are geographically hamstrung. They're historically hamstrung, right? And so you approaching it with this high and mighty, we're fucking better than you, and you're basically evil from our perspective, is to say that they are innately and intrinsically evil, and that can't change. Because they can't simply change their history.
That's a strong.
Yeah, but this is your act. This is the way you approach them.
Okay.
Stop. Wait, there is no such thing as a Russian government that is not autocratic.
So
you can always an autocrat. Yeah, duh.
So
Russian.
I don't have any problem with the Russian people, okay, or the population. I'm not criticizing the Russian people. I'm not saying that they deserve, to be. I've seen people on social media saying, "Oh, like Russian people deserve to be killed for this," and blah 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 blah. I even had stream that a lot of people disagreed with. I think it was last Sunday or last Tuesday where I was saying that the individual Russian soldiers are not culpable for the decisions of their government, and I don't want to see them all get slaughtered the way some people are cheering for. Okay. I put the blame 100% solely on a single person in Russia.
Okay, but the blame isn't 100% on one person.
It's on Vladimir Putin's shoulders in the way that he's running his country, because since he is an autocrat, the decisions are all his decisions to make. The people didn't elect him.
There is no other way to run Russia at this point in time.
What'd you say?
There is no other way to run Russia.
Can that change incrementally over time, Sargon? I'm curious. Or Carl? I'm trying to call you Carl now.
Whichever you prefer. I don't care. But given the history of Russia, I'm not going to be optimistic about it.
So that might be true. I don't know if that's true or not. But even if I were to grant you that and say,
well, it's neither true nor false because it's indeterminate because we're talking about the future.
But I'm saying, right after the Soviet Union collapses, it would be, I agree, it would be silly to think that a country that's been an empire for thousands of years, that then transforms into a communist empire for 60, 70 years, is going to just magically become, a Western liberal democracy.
Right, but then why say, Putin's bad because he's an autocrat?
Well, hold on. Okay. And as someone brought up a good point, which is that the last 20 years of Russia has been the only time in Russia, in Russia's thousands-year history, that it hasn't been an empire. Okay. So I understand that there's all these pressures here. And I understand that it would be ridiculous to assume that Russia is going to become a magical Western liberal democracy. Okay. But there's a huge difference between me saying I understand why situations have turned out the way they are and me justifying the way situations are.
Honestly, I think this is a position you're making up because you're being challenged on what you've said so far.
I've literally held this position.
No, I don't agree. I don't believe that you have. I think you might say that you do.
I've held the position that you can understand and empathize someone without justifying their position.
You make a bunch of other assumptions.
Since day one of this stream.
You make a bunch of other statements that completely betray that statement. Right?
Okay, so to be clear, you're saying you have no problem with what I just said, but you think I just said this now for the first time.
Oh no, I think you wish that you held that position, but you fall back into a position that is remarkably.
But what are you basing this on?
Right? This stream, frankly, and previous ones, the one with Sᴜᴜ as well. My God,
you just gave me the cultural relativism woke argument, so I don't know how to respond to this.
It is the problem that it is your culture. And it is your unknowing.
My white European culture, yes.
Yeah, no, it is. It is kind of a privilege, right? And this is what I've always felt whenever I've dealt with Russians. Right? Okay. I've always felt that I was fucking lucky to be English and they were unlucky to be Russian.
Of course.
No, you say of course, right? But that you're glossing over just the depth of the suffering in that country.
If I went back in time and every time I used the word Russia in this stream, I just said Putin, which I agree would be more appropriate, would we be having this conversation?
You can't really separate Putin from Russia here, right? He is a product of that suffering too.
Well,
and the people who like him,
to some extent,
right?
He's a product of realizing how to be corrupt.
100%. He is a product of that fucking suffering, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't someone's suffering doesn't justify them becoming a monster.
They're not monsters. There we go.
Vladimir Putin is a monster.
Yourself, he's a fucking monster. No, he's the best leader Russia has had in over 100 years, right? He is not genociding them.
Okay.
Literally, tens of millions
That's
of
a pretty low bar.
Wait,
Carl.
yeah, that's a very low bar.
For you, that's a low bar.
You're right for me, of course. What are you talking about?
I think a lot of people would say that's a low bar.
But you could.
We're talking about Russians.
This sounds like, what's that guy's name? This sounds like Danny Fayong making bullshit rationalizations for the Uyghur genocide.
I don't care what it sounds like. This is
but you can make the same.
Like
you can make the same argument. Sorry, on the same principle. Say, well, listen. Xi's really good for China. He's lifted all these people out of poverty. Communist China is doing the best for China. Genocide. It's ever fucking done.
He's actively engaged in a genocide, right? Look,
but why does that matter?
By our standards. What do you mean, why does that matter?
But that's by our standards. What us caring about the Uyghur genocide is liberal Western standards. Who cares?
Let me finish, right? But they're both bad by our standards, right?
Yes.
But by Chinese standards, Xi is not good either, right?
I don't know if that's true at all.
Of course that's true.
I don't know if that's true.
Was it in the 50s that the communists took over? Again, it's within living memory that there were better options in China, man. Right, but that you don't have that in Russia. In Russia, you just have worse and worse and worse the further back you go, right? And this is not to say that Putin is a good guy and we should support him or anything like that, which is what you said about me earlier. I fucking said, I just oppose what the media said. No, I know a lot more about this situation than you'd think. And I don't give a fuck what the media say.
Well, okay.
They're both wrong in both ways, basically.
So
can we structure this to where you can lay out an argument? You guys are kind of talking over one another.
His argument is that we shouldn't be judging Putin from our privileged American standard. That is
not a monster.
Okay.
This is the thing. You are treating him like a monster, and he's actually not.
I think
it's hard. It's hard to think of a more legitimate kind of leader that Russia could have.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand? Right?
No, I don't, because both Gorbachev and Yeltsin were far more open. Even Medvedev, for fuck's sakes, was far more open to having positive relations with the West and moving towards a more Western system of things than Putin. I don't buy into this belief or frame that you're trying to set up that Putin is literally the only option that's available to Russia. That being an autocrat who sucks up all the country's resources, makes himself the richest person on the planet, and murders anyone who fucking opposes him is the only choice available to Russia.
No, that's just a Russian choice. You're going to get that no matter who you have in charge of Russia. That's what it's always been.
We didn't have that with Gorbachev. We didn't have that with Yeltsin. We didn't have that with Medvedev.
Bollocks. I don't believe that for a second, right?
Okay. Well,
I don't believe that under the Soviet Union, they weren't killing dissidents or anything like that, right? Because one of the things the Soviets are really good is just not talking about it.
They were moving towards trying to become a more Western liberal democracy, or at least have more positive relations with the West.
And it would be
Putin is going in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that's probably something to do with America's positioning on this.
It's because he doesn't want to get Gaddafi.
Yeah.
Okay.
That seems reasonable, doesn't it?
That seems reasonable for him. That's not the moral position to have for the betterment of your country.
The moral position is that Putin gets Gaddafi'd, is it?
I never said that. Don't.
You just did.
Don't Kathy Newman me.
You just did.
No, right? I said.
So it's reasonable.
Do you think
for anyone to say that Putin shouldn't be Gaddafi'd? Right? Because what happened to Gaddafi, whether you like Gaddafi or not, wasn't nice, was it?
No, of course not.
Right.
What
so we
I
don't want
said,
Gaddafiisms.
What I said was that a leader of a country doing everything in their power, including sacrificing the well-being of their own country or their surrounding countries, just to shore up their power, is not the morally ethical position to take.
It is to shore up Russia's power.
It's not. It's a short Putin power.
Is,
that's the big
because
difference.
You're treating Russia as if it has no legitimacy.
I'm treating Putin as if he has no legitimacy.
There is no distinction here between Putin and Russia.
Well, I guess that's the disagreement that we have, because I think there is a difference, or there could be a difference.
Well, I mean, hypothetically, there could be, but in real life, there's not. You know, like saying that Putin is a populist. Yeah, he's a populist. Like, didn't you not see him go out in a stadium, Trump style, and give a "Russia's so great, let's wave our Russian flag" speech? He's the total populist, right?
But he would arrest anyone that came into that stadium that protested against him. How can you say that's populism? Because
Russian nationalism is a different beast to American nationalism.
Of course.
You say, of course, but
of course.
But Adam just asked, well, he arrests bad people, the people are opposing. Yeah, of course he does.
Well, he's talking about in terms of using the populist label, but not the nationalist label.
It doesn't mean he's not a populist, right? And he's just a Russian. And again, it's cultural misunderstanding.
No. But it's just about because the populism is usually like this. Oh, we're anti-elites, and if you literally have oligarchs who are the elites, it seems, and he's the master elite, it seems strange to categorize him as a populist who's against the elites.
Yeah, if any populist showed up in that auditorium and protested against the elites, what would happen to those people?
Yeah.
I'm not sure the people who'd be protesting would be considered to be populists, frankly. I think they'd be liberals.
Well, there are people in Russia that are protesting the war. They're getting arrested. Those aren't the populists?
Yeah, of course. No.
Okay.
The populists are the people who live, they're the people in the cities, right? They're the liberal elites who live in the cities. And the populists are the ones who live out in the hinterlands and think Mother Russia great.
I think
you're beaten by the Americans. We need to expand ourselves to gain our self-respect.
Well, I guess you could look at that framework only if you're going to broaden populism to outside of the individual country, to looking at it in some sort of like global elite stage. That's the only way you could frame the argument you're making.
The Russians see themselves as a people, and they see themselves as a people acting on the world stage.
I understand
as far as many of them are concerned, Putin is an effective leader.
Okay.
Do you think they would have that same perspective if they had access to global media?
I don't know. Probably.
So, under your framework that you're laying out, is Putin, like, is there a level at which Putin stops becoming justified, depending on?
Okay. Of course there are, but of course, you know, like, I'm not trying to say that Putin is good, right? I'm trying to say he's Russian.
You're saying he's the best Russia can accomplish. You have like super low expectations, basically.
Like, yes. Oh God, yes, exactly.
Bigotry of low expectations.
You need to have super low expectations, right?
But why the fuck should I? But you could be, even if that's all true, why the fuck should that affect my moral weight on the situation? Why should that affect my moral opinion on the situation?
Because your moral opinion is unrealistic.
It doesn't matter. The world has to interact. You and me and everyone that lives in the world has to interact with terrible people who are almost always terrible for reasons that they're not in their control, because their brains fucked up or horrible shit happened to them. That doesn't mean it justifies what they're doing. And we just say, well, you know, that's the roll of the dice. That's the best they could accomplish.
Yeah, but what you're saying then is that the Russians should act like an English-speaking liberal democracy.
I never said anything about what the Russian population should be doing in this situation.
Well, tell me what you're saying then.
I'm saying Putin is not fucking justified in invading Ukraine.
You told everyone how he was justified earlier, because if he loses all of his allies and then he gets overthrown, he gets Gaddafi'd, right? And
he's not from Putin's morally justified under my moral framework.
Under your absolute liberal framework. Fine.
Yes.
Okay. Stop comparing Russia to that, because it's not a liberal democracy.
So should every conversation that's ever had in the entire world
every
drop down into this insane cultural relativistic argument where we say, listen, why should poor people and why should anyone in America have to live up to American standards of being on time and going to work? I mean, why don't they just have their own cultural values, right? I mean, that's the white people values. Why can't non-white people have their own fucking cultural values that they can do and they can prosper in? Like, this is
I'd say because they're American.
Woke bullshit argument that we've been fighting this channel for like 3 fucking years.
This isn't woke bullshit.
It is woke bullshit.
No, this is political realism, because this is why Russia is doing all of this. It's because of a fundamental lack of respect for their civilization.
That's not a normative fucking claim.
Right? That's why they're doing this. They feel like America doesn't respect their civilization.
Carl, you're not a moral relativist. I've heard you say many times that you believe Western civilization has a greater culture, a better culture.
Yes, of course. You
debated Cᴏᴏɪᴏ and on this, and you destroyed him.
And I know, because exactly. Oh my God, exactly. Which is why I wish you'd fucking listen to me, right?
Yeah, but you're taking an opposite position that you took in that debate. You're basically taking a moral relativist position. You're saying, listen, we have these values and we can't.
Position on this.
We have to accept their values. Well, no, we don't have to accept their values. We can say, listen, your values fucking suck. Oppressing your people and stifling
their values.
Stifling debate through the boot and like choosing who I compete against. No, I do
have to understand them. No, you
we've
don't.
explained that. Well, I think we've explained their values pretty clearly.
No, you don't.
You said
understand
I did.
Russia
you said I
at
understood
all,
his
right?
Putin's fear. I understand it completely.
Yeah, but you don't understand why he
doesn't want to get Gaddafi. We're all in agreement.
No,
right?
It's not just that. Right? It's not just that. Of course, Putin doesn't want to get Gaddafi, but the Russians see themselves as the inheritors of a great civilization. And the Americans don't respect them at all. In fact, they demonize them on a daily basis.
Who has stood in the way of Russia achieving the cultural power that they once had historically? Who is standing in the way of that?
Well, right now?
Yes.
Well, the United States, with NATO, obviously.
Putin is the one standing in the way of that. Putin has stifled innovation in Russia for the last 20 years.
That's not their concern.
They're not a free and fair society.
That's your concern. That's an American concern.
Well, that's how you're going to move up in the world culture.
Yes.
That's an American view.
Well, that's not a Russian. That's reality.
It's a Western values view.
It's one way of interpreting the world.
I mean, so how is Russia going to move up in the world otherwise? By conquering its neighbors again? Are we going back to
that's
that value
the way
system?
they've done it for the last 1,000 years. Yeah.
Okay. So if that's their position, why should I respect that? I can understand
so
that,
we've
but
got
why
to the
should I
point where you
respect
finally
it?
admit that you don't respect Russia.
Why should
I don't
we,
respect the hypothetical you're laying out. I don't know if it's actually true or not.
Admit what you are.
We don't respect. Listen,
right?
we don't respect autocrats. I mean,
Sargon, you're not the voice of Russia. Okay, I'm engaging with the argument.
I am in this
forward.
Conversation.
No,
because you're not going to understand them.
I don't believe that you have the psychic connection to understand the collective unconsciousness of Russia.
Okay, but then
I'm
you're
engaging
American,
with
and everyone thinks Americans are fucking ignorant for a reason.
Okay.
Right,
one at a time, guys. Let's just have a nice conversation.
Americans are ignorant for a reason, right? And this conversation shows it, right?
Oh, no, don't go down Don't go down the spoon route. Right? Come on, Carl. Let's be friends.
Yeah, but
here.
he's right and you're wrong, right? You have to understand. Like it's the worst. It's the most cringe thing in the world.
You haven't.
You guys, you guys talk about liberal democracy,
you keep making the same point and then you don't explain anything.
What would you like me to do? What don't you understand?
I can completely understand Putin, or even if it's true, the broader Russian perspective about what they want their place in the world to be. That doesn't mean I have to respect it or justify it morally.
Right. So
These are two completely different things.
Yeah, totally.
You don't respect Russia.
I don't respect your position of what you're claiming Russia's position is.
But that's what they say.
If that's Russia's position,
say it.
Well, one at a time. Just one at a time.
It'll make you feel better for this conversation. If that's Russia's position, then no, I don't respect it. Okay.
Right. Okay. So you want to see Russia crushed?
I want to see them adopt a system that doesn't destroy, doesn't fuck over everyone around them.
That's you've got to understand. They're not going to agree to what you're saying.
Define crushed.
You don't think anyone can change? You don't think any country can change?
Things change all the time, Sitch.
Okay, then why are you saying this? You have this
because they change in line with the existing position that they're in line with the operating and animating principles of the
Western
culture.
Democracy after becoming an empire for thousands of years?
They got nuked. That's why.
Is that the only reason you think?
Yeah, that's absolutely the reason.
Okay.
Complete complete and total surrender. That's the reason, right? The Russians didn't get that treatment. They got the slow decline and collapse, right? So the Russians are currently in a state of humiliation, like the Chinese were.
Yeah, they are. Like totally.
Yeah, exactly, right? And Sitch is saying they don't deserve respect.
Do you know what the Chinese did, though, to fix their situation?
Or not? Do they deserve respect or not? And the answer is no.
Why do you keep trying to frame it this way?
Because that's what they care about.
Do you?
No, I mean,
what do you base
you're
respect on, Sargon? Merit, or do you base respect on
consideration for their position?
What if their position sucks?
Let's have that.
Wait, what if their position sucks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Their position sucks, right? Their position absolutely sucks.
So why should I respect that position if it sucks?
Because they're stuck with it.
So just out of sympathy, out of sorrow for
your
them?
options then are to deal with them in a respectful way or crush them. So which one would you like?
Our options are to either respect the shitty position or crush them.
Can we step back for a second, because
this is important.
Well, no,
there's no.
So you're on the cusp of an understanding here, right?
Well, I don't feel like any level of respect would change the situation. Though.
No.
You've set up this criteria where respect of Putin would have made him not invade his next door neighbor, and I just fundamentally disagree with that. That's you can give them all the respect in the world.
Right? You're not treating Russia as if they're a great power, whereas the Russians view themselves as a great power.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? Mm-hmm. You are not respecting Russia as a great power. This was inevitable that they would start lashing out because of that. Like, this is just diplomacy 101.
Right? No,
you are doing nothing to negotiate or compromise with the Russians, right? You're demanding everything on America's terms in language that the Russians probably don't even really comprehend, frankly, to standards to which they could never really adhere.
That is not true.
That's exactly what you've done.
No, NATO and America has been trying, especially like Obama. No, Obama had an entire thing for 4 years when Putin wasn't president to try to reset America-Russian relations. And they bent over backwards, and every Republican in this country called Obama a fucking apology tour through Europe, apology tour towards Russia. He was bending over to Russia. Fucking Mitt Romney was criticizing for this. Everyone was. Mm-hmm. And the second Putin went back in office, he went back on all the progress they made and said, "Fuck you, America." Okay. Yeah, so this idea that America is just sitting here spitting in Russia's eye is not true.
I don't agree. I think that America has spat in Russia's eye, right? And I don't blame America for doing it, right? I don't blame America.
No, but I'm saying you're laying out a framework where you're saying America and NATO is just punching Russia in the face, and that's not accurate. Russia,
I don't agree
America and NATO
I think that's a totally
overtures spitting in their eye
one at a time,
again.
Guys. Come on.
Russia and America and NATO has made overtures time and time again, and Vladimir Putin is not. Him personally, he's not having it because he hates the West and everything they stand for.
On terms that, no, I don't agree that he hates the West and everything they stand for.
He's been pretty vocal about it, but
I think that this is about the terms, right? Because America is, again, like when I said conquering the world in self-defense, like I don't understand how you can rationalize NATO literally getting to Ukraine and being like, right, we're going to try and fast track Ukraine into NATO.
They did.
And for the Russians not to see that.
They did the opposite of that, though. That didn't happen.
Oh, right. So they didn't have the fast track thing.
Like they didn't. They literally did the opposite of that.
But George Bush wanted to put him on that, right?
Yeah, George Bush did, and NATO said no.
Right.
George Bush is a fucking neocon crazy person. I'm not going to defend.
Yeah, but why is America trying to get the buffer states at Russia's border into NATO?
We want to
about George. Why did George Bush want Ukraine in NATO? Or are you talking about why does the general whole? Because these are different
George
things
as well.
Because George Bush. I mean, George Bush has the. He has the. We're going to build. Liberal democracies, liberal hegemony across the world.
That's what he'll say. But remember, NATO, from the Russian position, is basically the American empire, right?
But that's a stupid position to have.
Okay, brilliant. Welcome to Russia. Right?
Okay.
They see NATO as an existential threat because it was formed to be an existential threat against Russia.
Well, it was a form to be a defense against the threat of Russia trying to take over the rest of fucking Europe, basically.
Right. And now NATO's taking over Europe.
They're not taking.
How are the Russians going to look at that? Right.
The Russian army would march in and say, "Okay, you're going to be communist now," or the Soviets, I guess, back in those days. Okay. And NATO, basically, countries say, "NATO, can we please join you?" And they say, "Well, you got to reform your country." And they say, "Okay," and then they get to join NATO.
That you said earlier, there is no neutral position. Right. And I agree that being a liberal democracy with all the money that America is going to provide definitely is a preferable option. Right. But this is us speaking from our biases.
Of course.
This is not us respecting the Russian position. And it's okay if you don't respect Russia. You can just say it, right? I don't really respect Russia.
One second, right? Sargon. Can we separate? Because there seems to be two different debates going on here. One is over this respect, diplomacy type thing, which I'm not convinced that even if we had perfect diplomacy and showed utmost respect for Russia, things would be any different. And then there is the motivation of Putin to stay in power and protect his legacy. So you keep pivoting back to the respect thing, as if America just respected more, things would be different. But that doesn't change anything on the side of the equation with the Putin staying in power, avoiding being Gaddafi. Respect has nothing to do with that. Diplomacy has nothing to do with that. So I'm curious on which, do you agree with us on the staying in power side of the equation? Do you agree that Putin is in a game where he's trying to stay in power, and ultimately a lot of his decision making is impacted by that game?
Yeah, I mean, Russia is basically a mafia state, right?
Okay, so you agree with us on that stuff then? So then, just the do you agree? Do you agree with us?
Hang on, right? I've spoken to, and I've watched lots of Russians talking about this until, of course, the Iron Curtain of the West came down and we can't get their media anymore. And like someone like Konstantin Kisin from Trigonometry, right? He's Russian, right? He's a very pro-Western
I watched his talk, yeah.
Right. He does not think Putin is in any danger of being overthrown. Does he know more about that than us?
Probably not. I mean,
probably not.
Is he an ex-KGB member or something? I don't know.
Well, I mean, he's a Russian.
Yeah, but
he's got friends and family in Russia. He speaks to them on a daily basis. Like they give him the barometer of what popular opinion in their areas are and whatnot.
I mean, of
and
course,
he thinks that Putin is generally quite popular with the people.
I live in America, and I'm not sure. I have a $500 bet on whether or not Trump is going to run for president. Like, I don't have any inside information. But
he's obviously going to run. But the point is, I don't think Putin's position in Russia is in danger, right?
Okay.
He's been doing this for 30 years? Like he's manipulated the networks entirely to his favor. He's a very clever man, if nothing else, right? He's a ruthless, I mean, on a personal level, I consider him evil, right? But on the level of what a Russian autocrat should be to be an effective autocrat of Russia, he is a very effective autocrat. And he has advanced Russia's position in the face of America's provocations. And they are provocative. And I'm sick of this narrative that America did nothing wrong here. NATO did nothing wrong. No, I think there has been, if you consider that the Russians deserve at least a modicum of respect, right, for their position and their history and the culture and the people. Right?
He's increased their...
Wait, this is the primary issue here. Why does us or NATO or U.S., quote unquote, respecting the legacy of the Russian Empire supersede all the people who live in the surrounding countries who want to be part of NATO?
Well, I mean, I'd say because otherwise it's going to be war with Russia.
Okay, so is the only argument you're making is a purely physical, the consequences of this is that it could lead to a World War III argument?
No. I mean,
is there a moral
that is one aspect of what I'm saying, right?
Okay.
But I think it's also bad for us. I don't really see what good it is to constantly pathologize Russia as some sort of evil pariah state, especially given how much we need them. Like, Europe is totally dependent on Russia.
I don't disagree with that.
I know. So why are we treating them like the bastard stepchildren?
America's position towards Russia literally only changed after they invaded Crimea. Before that, Americans weren't concerned about Russia being a threat or Russia being evil or an enemy.
Really?
Yes. There's the famous debate with Obama versus Mitt Romney, where Mitt Romney says, we need to be worried about Russia. And Obama's like, the Cold War called, they want their policy back. And everyone laughed at Mitt Romney. And he looked like a fucking buffoon.
But now, in the last, say, 5 years...
because of Russia's direct actions of invading Crimea and destabilizing the region, opinions have changed.
I don't agree that was destabilization, right? And it doesn't matter. What's the American investment in Ukraine?
the American investment. Well, America believes that the world would be better and safer if everyone is under a Western liberal democracy. This is what the liberal hegemonic theory is. That's not imperialism.
Yes, it is.
No.
Yes, it is.
I
cannot for the fucking life of me understand how America gives two shits about Ukraine if it's not to corral and hold Russia at bay.
So, well, wait a minute.
Why would
should America just say, listen, we know that that Russia was our main power competitor for the last 60, 70 years, and that brought us closer to the brink of global annihilation than any other point in all of human existence. Mm-hmm. But now they've thrown the towel, and we should just assume that they'll never grow up again to become that power, and we should just let them, start absorbing other countries and build back.
Right,
power.
There we go. Right, okay. So it is about corralling Russia, pushing them back as far as they can be pushed back. Right?
No, it's saying you can play in the sandbox with everyone else according to the rules that the world has abided by, and if you don't,
America sets.
Well, since America and the rest of the Western liberal democracy countries happen to be the most powerful in the world, and also since I believe in Western liberal democracy, I believe it has the moral weight here. Okay,
right. So you can play by our rules. Force that we've boiled this down to. We're strong enough to be able to do it.
You can play by our rules, or you can fuck off.
So you're in favor of crushing Russia?
That's not in favor of crushing Russia.
That's so bad.
Sargon,
what you're saying is, if it's not in favor of crushing Russia, you're saying the Russians have got no right to fight back.
I'm literally
Sargon, that's a little,
I'm taking John Meeschmeyer's perspective of offensive realism. Okay.
Right. So you're conquering the world in self-defense. Right. Again, to absolutely pin Russia in a great power into a corner.
That is not a fair framing. Okay.
That is exactly what's happening.
If you can't play by the fucking rules of freedom and democracy, where you engage in free trade, you don't fucking murder your own citizens, is conquering the world? Come on.
No, this is a distinctly imperial mindset. It's incredibly high-handed.
Well, can we hold on? Can we get some definitions
to the Russians?
Sargon.
It is to take everything from them. No wonder
Carl, you've used the term imperialism a lot. I was under the impression imperialism was where a nation goes, takes over an area, installs a government, and basically rules over the people. That's not necessarily what we're doing.
I think that there are many kinds of imperialism, and I'm not interested in arguing the toss. This is definitely an imperialistic mindset.
Well, how are you defining imperialism then? Because if we're incentivizing them by offering them financial aid,
if you like,
it's a different thing than if we're going in
Athenian imperialism. Right?
Look, America's offering Ukraine financial aid to stop their corruption
in exchange for becoming a liberal democracy.
Right. And Russia is invading the country and setting up a puppet government. Which of those is imperialism? I'm curious.
They're both imperialism.
Okay, but if we had to rank order them, which is the worst
America and Russia are both
imperialism? Which is a more favorable form of imperialism to the local population?
Who cares?
The local population cares. That's who cares.
Yes, so what?
Wait. What do you mean who cares?
That's not the question.
You started the conversation.
You started with the imperialism line.
You started this conversation by saying that this is the only alternative for Russia. Okay. And you agree with me that there's no neutral position. And part of the reason I think there's no neutral position is because Russia won't allow there to be a neutral position. So you can't, if there's only two options in the world, and it's your version of imperialism through saying, hey, be a Western democracy where you can trade and create a functioning society where people are happy, or Russia fucking invades you, and these are your only two options, the American form of quote unquote imperialism is obviously the better solution here.
Well, gee, if you frame it like that, I guess
just say it. Just say it. Okay, win.
The point, though,
you're the one that brought up imperialism, Carl. I didn't want to go this route, but you forced our hand.
You're both imperial.
I have one question while I have the floor here. Carl, does a governing system affect the population's economic conditions?
Right, I'm just going to answer the question that you asked first, right? So you're both imperial powers, and the Americans follow the Athenian model, and of course the Russians follow the Spartan model. Now it means that you have now taken territory or you're trying to take territory right up to the Russian border, right? The Russians, not being clever or liberal or rich, don't know what else to do other than simply use force, because that's what they've always done, right? Ukraine, right? What I think would be the right thing to have done is for Ukraine to be pro-Russian, right? It is their hinterland. It is on their border. They have an ancient connection with that place. America has no fucking connection with that place, apart from Joe Biden's son, obviously. You know, apart from the money that American elites are siphoning out of it, America has no connection with Ukraine. And it's got no particular business.
I mean, Russia has an ancient connection fucking over Ukraine, so I'm not sure that's good.
So what?
Okay. So the American imperialism is basically America saying, hey, our system of governance and arm... Wait.
No, hang on. Hang on.
Oh,
the Russians won't rest while they think that their immediate borders are frankly under enemy control. That's how they'll see it, right? Now, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying I think this is, right? And I think this, I mean, Putin has just outright said this about Ukraine, and they're obviously trying for regime change, right? They're not just...
Yeah, they're doing imperialism. Yes, by force.
Yes, you both are. Okay, it's not a moral judgment.
Yeah, but you're saying you're bad for being imperialistic. At the same time saying Russia's totally justified in being imperialistic. You're the one that has the contradiction.
Well, no, it's not a contradiction, right? You've got no particular interest in Ukraine other than some wildly abstract, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if Ukraine was a liberal...
We don't want the Soviet Union to be a threat again and destroy the world?
It's not going to be a threat again. Right?
How do you know that?
Russia's a crumbling nation.
That makes it more dangerous.
Yeah, what is a crumbling nation led by an autocrat mafia boss
with
nukes?
Bleeds people. It bleeds money. And what they're trying to do is to be able to literally to be able to hold their heads up high and say, I'm proud to be a Russian. Right? That's what they're trying to do. And you're doing everything in your power to take that away from them. And the thing is, right,
Germany had the exact same motivation under Hitler, and look where they ended up.
No,
yes, they did.
Jesus Christ! I don't agree with that at all.
What do you mean? I don't think Putin's the Western powers fucked us over after the collapse in World War I, and we need to hold our heads up high and identify around the German identity.
Nazi
blah blah blah.
It does sound straight from the rise and fall of the Third Reich.
That's a very very reductive view of that. Right?
Yeah, I'm not saying they're going to become fucking genocidal. I'm just saying that's the same motivation that leads countries and people to do all sorts of crazy shit.
Okay, so one way of avoiding crazy shit would be to respect them.
Oh my God, that's so naive.
So they can.
I can't even believe you're saying it, Carl.
What? So you don't think the Russians should be respected?
No,
I think they should be respected, but I don't think it's going to change anything.
There's some form of respect that's going to solve this problem.
Yes.
Well, yeah, possibly respecting the fact that they're a great power, right?
So if America, but what does that mean tangibly? Because if America says
that means tangibly not trying to take Ukraine into NATO.
Okay, but so if America says, but wait a minute, if America says, because this all started in 2014, it had nothing to do with NATO. It had to do with Ukraine. This had to do with Ukraine over its own sovereign fucking volition, wanting to have closer economic ties with the EU because the EU is richer than Russia. And Russia saying, fuck you, we're not going to allow that. Okay. It had nothing to do with NATO at that period.
So?
What?
So?
Okay, so
I hate to sound callous about this,
but this is the problem.
But nobody cares about Ukraine's opinion.
No, okay, but that's why this doesn't make any sense to me.
The Americans you're saying to take this province.
You're saying America and the West should respect Russia, but when you say that, what you mean is by respecting Russia, we should let them do whatever the fuck they want in their own sphere of influence and take over and fuck over anyone they want.
Russia did not invade, it's not going to invade Ukraine if Ukraine has a pro-Russian leadership, right? There's no
and if they don't have a pro-Russian leadership, then they do.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so fuck Ukraine. Basically, is your position? Just tell them to fuck every country surrounding Russia.
Well, it's either that or fuck Russia, and fuck Russia ends up possibly in a much worse position than fuck Ukraine.
This is crazy.
No, but again, if you're just making the argument to try to avoid World War III, fine, I understand that.
No, I'm trying.
But you're trying to make some sort of deeper moral claim, which I don't understand at all.
Yeah, I'm trying to make the argument civilize Russia, right?
Well, that's our argument, though.
Yeah, but no, it's not.
And
Your
Putin is Putin. No, our argument is civilized Russia, and Putin is standing in the way.
Russia will never become "quote unquote" civilized under Putin.
It can't. It can't. Listen. I asked you a question about governing systems. Do governing systems affect economic conditions?
Hang on. No. You've just made a wild statement that I don't think you can substantiate. Right? You can't know what will be the case. But what Putin, I think, does do well for Russia is give them a sense of being competently led, and that Russia can win victories against the great Satan.
Do people want?
Has nothing to do with civilized.
Do people want foreign war victories, or do they want better economic conditions? Right? So, Carl,
they're not. This isn't a material question, Adam. Right? And I know
it is. You made the argument that Putin. You made the argument that Putin increased the people of Russia's economic conditions. You made that argument.
I'm not making. I didn't make that argument at all. I made the argument that he could give.
You said he was the best. You said he was the best that they've had. That they were in dire economic conditions.
But you just assumed that meant material conditions. I'm not talking.
He means just that it gives the people like this sense of we're part of the greater Russian Empire again.
Right.
Okay.
Because Russia can win victories over America. Right, even if they're small, they're unbelievably small. Right, America has and I'm looking at this as a third party. Right, America has Russia so totally fucking whipped. I don't understand why you need to keep turning the.
Why is that? Again, I don't understand why it's a moral position to say that having the Russian people have a sense that they're not a dying empire is worth sacrificing all the populations around the country. How is that
sacrificing all the populations around the country? That's a ridiculous, extreme statement. That doesn't.
No, they're literally invading Ukraine to do this very thing
because of what's happened, right?
Because they're not a pro-Russian government of their own volition anymore.
Yes. Okay, that's the case, right? But if you want the Russians to not feel like they're constantly under threat, as in to be in an emotional position where they might be receptive to American goods, American services, American moral innovations. Because the thing is, right, it's not that the Russians don't recognize, it's not they're not European, right? They do recognize that these things would be good, but they also have undergone hardships like you wouldn't fucking believe, right? No matter what you do to the Russians, they will always be able to say, well, we've had worse. Always, in every situation. And they will just tough it out, right? The one virtue I think you could really attribute to Russia is stubbornness, right? They have undergone and come through the worst things that have ever happened to humanity. Like, seriously, it's just it's just staggering that within living memory, people have been eating their own children, right? Do you
the same could be saying Ukraine went through the fucking Holodomor. Okay?
Yes, I know.
The tragedy that Ukraine has suffered under the fucking heel of Russia for the last 300 years is
the Bolsheviks.
Insane.
That's the Bolsheviks.
And the Tsars before them. The Tsars were trying to erase.
The Tsars weren't starving them out ideologically.
No, but they were trying to erase their entire culture. They're trying to make it illegal to speak Ukrainian. But then you've got the rest of what's happened.
That's just one thing. Right? Like the Bolsheviks killed something like 20 million Christians. They burned down dozens of cathedrals. Right. Like, no, don't just go right. Because you're like, oh, look what they did to Ukraine. No, they did this to everything. The entire country. And then when you go back before that, you've got the tremendous, the Tsars owned the vodka industry. So they kept the entire country just in this perpetual state of drunken, depression. And then before that, you've got hundreds of years of Mongol domination, and it's just like, right, okay, this is shit. And so I'm not surprised the Russians are like, we don't care. You're gonna treat us on our terms, and if you compromise with us, then maybe we can both get some of what we want and walk away feeling like we got, we didn't get fucking done over. Right? But Americans don't approach Russia like this at all.
You keep saying compromise and respect, but when you say compromise and respect, what you mean is let Russia take over the surrounding countries around.
Oh, you can take them over.
Okay. It's totally insane to me to say that a country just looking across its borders at the EU and at America and saying, we think that that's a better way of life. We want to start moving in that direction. You say that's imperialism on the same level as Russia rolling tanks into the country and saying, you're going to do what we say.
you have to have a Western liberal democracy, which means access to Western companies, access for Western elites. What's the difference?
No, but if
It's
there's
about access
countries,
to Russian companies and Russian elites.
you cannot compare. No, because you're saying we have to sacrifice all of these countries' self-determination and sovereignty just to appease this idea of the
You
Russian
don't think it
Empire
can be
in the
neutral?
minds of the population.
You don't think Ukraine can be neutral?
I don't, because of Russia.
Then it doesn't have
not
fucking
because of the
sovereignty,
West.
does it?
I don't think it could be neutral because
It's
of
dependent.
Russia.
I agree. It can't be neutral because of Russia.
Okay.
But it also can't be neutral because of America.
I disagree with that completely.
Right. Okay. See, America, this is always the point. America did nothing wrong. It's got we basically don't exist.
No, that's not what I mean. America's
That's
fine.
what you're saying.
America's fine being friends with horrible dictators.
America has no business in Ukraine.
It's not a question of that. That's the wrong framing. Ukraine of
To
its own
you,
choice.
it's a question to the Russians.
Ukraine of its own choice says we want
Fuck
to become
Ukraine's
more.
own choice.
Okay, so Ukraine's sovereignty is off the table. Is what you're saying.
You said it is. It can't be neutral, right?
It
Therefore,
doesn't
it can never really be sovereign.
I said there's no political party. There's no power base. There's no thought process in Ukraine that's saying we want to be the magical neutral state. Okay,
Yeah.
there's people in Ukraine who want to be more of EU Western, and there's people that want to be more Russian. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no middle ground position that anyone has.
I agree. It's not really a sovereign state, then, is it?
Of course it is. What are you talking
No,
about?
it's not.
There-
You're always look, a sovereign state would be able to say, "Well, look, we're not going to get involved in either side of a conflict," right?
It's not. No.
That
When
would
I
be a
say-
sovereign choice.
No.
That wasn't coerced by either side.
Wait,
That's the only way
Ukraine
we can
can
guarantee a sovereign choice.
Ukraine can say that they want to have closer economic ties with other countries,
Yes,
and everyone votes for that, and that's a sovereign fucking position.
I don't agree.
How is it not?
I think this is totally naive
What
because, like you said, there's no option to not. You choose one or the other, and so they're going to choose the one that seems to be the most pleasurable and provides the most material benefits. Obviously.
Okay, so but if
But
that's
this
your
doesn't mean that
definition,
this is like an independent sovereign
but this
choice.
is
coercion.
weird. It's very weird that you're taking this position because you're basically. We had a debate very long time ago about whether free will exists, and you took the position that it does. And under the guise that it doesn't matter if people really have, people can just make the choice. Okay. Obviously, no one has a completely free will choice that's detached from all of the environment, everything around them. Okay. And you're now making the opposite position. Under your definition of sovereignty, there would be no sovereignty for any fucking country in the world because countries always have to make decisions about what they think is better, what they think is worth over what exists currently. That's what sovereignty means.
I'm not arguing that countries have free will.
No, you're saying country. You're saying no country, under your definition of sovereignty, no country has sovereignty.
That's not true. And you can
It is
think
true.
of it. If you spent 2 seconds, you could think of examples.
I can't.
Of course you can. Try. Think of a country that espouses neutrality.
No, that's not. No. Because you said that if there's two choices presented to a country, and a country decides to go in one direction of its own volition, that's not sovereignty.
Yeah, but
I'm saying that's not a fair way of looking at what sovereignty is, because so much of life, so much of reality is we don't live in the Tom Jump objective perfect universe where we can all manifest our will by thought alone. We have to choose from the buffet of choices that reality presents us. And that's what sovereignty is. And that's what free will is. It's saying, I get to choose from this table what direction I want to go. And Ukraine is saying, I want to choose to have favorable relations with the EU. And Russia's saying, well, we're going to march tanks in here and take your choice away from you.
Yeah, but there's, like you said, it can't be neutral, right? Imagine, do you think the Americans aren't meddling in some way in Ukraine, the Ukrainian politicians who chose to be pro-Russia?
I would imagine that that Russia and America and all countries with power are meddling.
So now you're just as bad as each other because that's all the Russians are doing.
One is meddling with incentives and one is using force, Sargon.
So why are you meddling?
There's a giant difference, don't you think?
Why are you meddling in Ukraine? What possible interest do you have in Ukraine?
Are you saying that there's no difference between forceful intervention and incentives? Like, that's crazy.
I'm saying war is a continuation of politics.
You're saying, why can't we all just be isolationists? Is what you're saying.
No, I'm saying.
That is what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that I agree with your position that Ukraine can't be neutral, right? Which means it can't truly be sovereign, because it would never be able to make a decision that wasn't countermanded or coerced by one power or the other, right? So Ukraine's sovereignty, I think, is basically like Belgium, right? It's basically a fiction, okay? And it's a useful political fiction. I'm not saying it's not, right? And I'm not saying that ideally Ukraine shouldn't be sovereign. I think ideally it should. It would be nice if we had this perfect Westphalian order where no country ever crossed the borders of another country or interfered subversively with their inner workings and things like that. That'd be great, right? But that's not the world we live in. So let's not pretend that it is, right? And so the Americans, the American investment in Ukraine is subversive, right? It's going to be with money and promises and possibly who knows what spy games have gone on and whatnot, right? But the Russian investment in Ukraine is a lot more direct and heavy, right? Mm-hmm. For America, Ukraine is 20,000 miles away, 10,000 miles away, something like that. This isn't a big deal, but for Russia, it's literally 0 miles away. And a country that's constantly demonizing you is like, yeah, we're going to try and bring them into our fold, to our sphere of influence, into NATO, which is a very strong sphere of influence, right? This is a legitimate security concern.
So Ukraine, again, as I said, the people in Ukraine were not even in favor of joining NATO until Russia invaded Crimea and took it over. Okay, yeah. So this is Russia's own doing here. They're creating the situation that the Ukrainian people want to turn away from them.
As if, again, this is like the hatchling argument, as if, then nothing happened. The Russians have got no opinion on the expansion of NATO up until the annexation of Crimea.
So again, this started from them trying to have positive EU relations. It didn't have to do with NATO.
No, they are literally accusing NATO of being behind their moves. Right? It is reactions to NATO.
Russia,
I don't agree. I think that you can't say it's not true.
Putin had publicly stated, and Russia publicly stated, that in 2008, when they said they weren't going to put Ukraine and Georgia on the MAP program to NATO, they said that's a good thing. They were on board with that. That was the compromise solution. That was the quote-unquote neutral position.
Yeah.
And there had been no change from that whatsoever until Russia invaded Crimea.
Apart from Zelensky, right? Like the whole thing has been...
Yeah, once Russia starts invading Ukraine and starts funding separatists so that they're thrust into a civil war for the last 7 years, then Ukraine's like, maybe we should revisit this whole NATO thing.
Yeah, but this is bollocks though, right? Because you can look at a map of just the expansion of NATO and see it creeping ever closer to Russia's borders. And as far as the Russians are concerned, this is a violation of repeated promises to not do this. And then you get Bush going, he wanted to put on the fast track to joining NATO, which, as you said, they were rejected. But you can see the intention, you can see the will behind it.
But that's part of the benefit of the American system, is that you have Bush.
Who cares? Who cares?
Putin should care. This is the big difference here. We have Bush, who's the super neocon. He wants to throw everyone in NATO. Then you have he can't run for office anymore. Obama comes into power. He has a completely different thought process on Russia. Tries to have positive relationship with Russia completely, and doesn't talk about fast tracking Georgia or Ukraine into NATO whatsoever. But with Putin, you only have to deal with Putin forever because he's an authoritarian dictator.
Yeah, but the president isn't the sole architect of this. Like the permanent
the other NATO countries also are. But
no, it's the permanent apparatus of the United States and its international policy, right? That no matter what president you have, you basically have the same foreign policy. That's what the Russians see.
But the problem here, and with this conversation, I still don't understand is you're just describing reality, which I can agree with you could be true, but there's no moral prescription here about why Russia gets to just dictate all its surrounding countries' behavior and say, you can't do what you want to do.
because otherwise they start invading places. And it turns out that Joe Biden isn't prepared to go to war with Russia over Ukraine.
So we all just have to have an idea of appeasement, basically. We have to appease the insanity that is Vladimir Putin and Russia.
Appeasement is if Russia was like, everyone's just sat around doing nothing. And Russia's like, you know what, I think I might invade Turkey. And we're like, oh, well, don't do that. Take a piece of Turkey instead, a historical piece. And then, and then, I might invade Georgia. Well, take a piece of Georgia too. No, that's not what's happening, right? We're the ones advancing on Russia.
No, we're not advancing. The world is changing.
Of course we are. NATO has advanced on Russia.
The world is changing, and countries want to go in specific directions of their own choice. I know you don't care. You care so much about the thoughts and feelings of the Russian people, but you don't care at all about the sovereignty of all the countries that surround it. That don't want to be involved with Russia.
That's not the question. That's just not the question. No, it's not. That's your moral cover for continuing to advance on Russia, right? But that's getting countries invaded. Right, you giving these? They just shut up. You know, it's bollocks.
It's not bollocks. They invaded Crimea had nothing to fucking do with NATO at all.
No, that's bollocks. That
is not bollocks.
That's just American bollocks, frankly.
That is not
total bull.
Russia wasn't even making that claim in 2014 that anything to fucking do with NATO.
They've been making that claim for decades. Literally decades.
Taking Crimea.
George Bush in 2000. Okay.
How did the 2014 Maidan protest have anything to do with NATO?
On the forefront of Putin's mind, and he has mentioned it for literally decades, and it's because America doesn't show Russia any respect. Okay. That's how they view it, right? And you've got, of course, everyone's got their reasons for everything. This is my excuse for this. This is my excuse. Okay, big deal. Like, no matter what, it depends on whatever position you adopt, the excuses that you adopt. So, like, give me American excuses. Okay, yeah, they're good. They're real, from the American perspective.
You're not giving me from the Russian perspective. You're just saying Russia's going to throw a temper tantrum, and we just have to abide by it. That's what you're saying.
People die when Russia throws a temper tantrum. So being like, we're just going to keep advancing, like fucking bullish idiots. And now,
you're acting like the American army is positioned itself on the fucking, in Eastern Europe, and it's just marching closer and closer to Russia. When in reality, what's happening is countries that were once aligned with Russia saying, hey, we want to have our economies and our culture and our philosophy of governance to be more closely aligned with the West of their own fucking choice. And Russia's saying, I don't like that.
In 2020, okay, right, the international community was discussing putting American nukes in Poland.
Yeah, when?
In 2020, I just said. All right. Don't act like Poland doesn't have NATO weapons. NATO has got 2 weeks ago from the Sun. NATO increases presence in Poland, more troops. Like, if Russia views NATO as an existential threat, which I think it does.
What did Russia do the literal day Obama was elected? What do you mean? Who cares?
Who cares?
No. You don't get to play this game where you say America did this, and then you ignore everything that Russia did that led up to America's response.
You won't accept America has done anything. America has rolled the borders of NATO right up past where it said it wouldn't ever put weapons and military.
The day
you're just
Obama,
like, did nothing. It's bollocks.
The day Obama's elected, Russia moves nukes into the middle of fucking Europe, violating a bunch of their treaties, just to see what Obama would fucking do.
Yeah.
And after all that, does Obama go crazy on them? He says, no, I want to have a reset of positive relations with Russia. And it starts working until Putin comes into power, and then he nixes the whole fucking thing.
Yeah. Why would he do that?
Because he doesn't like the West. Because he probably has ideas that because from a material perspective, he's running his country like a mafia, and from an ideological perspective, he probably thinks everything that you're saying. He doesn't agree with the whole Western liberal hegemony and thinks America sucks.
No, he thinks America are a bunch of liars.
That's it.
I mean, he literally called you an empire of lies.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a lot of projection coming from Putin.
But it's also true.
The person who has fake elections every 4 years says that we're an empire of lies. Okay.
Yeah. No, but this is literally what he recently just said. Did you not listen to his Empire of Lies speech?
Yeah, I did. It was fucking crazy. It was just crazy.
No, it wasn't crazy. It was totally rational from the Russian perspective. But you don't respect their position at all. You call him a monster. You think that they don't have any right to have any kind of influence in the surrounding countries on their borders, which is historically unprecedented, and this is leading them to feel like caged animals.
I don't think countries have a right to march their tanks into other countries that are trying to make their own decisions about the future that they want to go. Yeah, I don't respect that. I don't respect that position.
Then America is the worst offender in this regard.
I don't like when the fucking America does that shit either. This is not a whataboutism.
But you don't think America should be destroyed?
No.
Then Russia shouldn't be destroyed.
We don't think Russia should be destroyed.
So it's a forgivable thing
I don't think
to do.
Russia or the
Hang on,
who's taking this
Russia
position?
or the Russian people should be killed or destroyed.
Thing to do.
You're
to
the one
overthrow
framing them
governments
in
in
this
other countries.
fatalistic perspective that there's no choice for them to change or to not do what they're doing, basically. I don't abide by that.
I don't think so. I think that Russia is basically locked on a course for war.
Okay, well, I don't agree with that.
Okay, well then what's your evidence for that?
That other countries can change, that people can change. They
Yeah, but
change
they're literally invading fucking Ukraine.
They changed
They've
from a
literally
czar
invaded
to
Jordan,
being
they've invaded
communism.
Crimea.
Okay.
They're actually in a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and they're surrounding the capital. I'm like, look, if we keep pushing Russia like this, they're going to go to war. They're currently at war, and you're like, well, I think they can change. Based on what? I think it's the same old Russia that it's always been.
So according to your argument, they can't change, and we just have to fucking deal with them.
As they
Again,
are.
not for
I
World
think
War
you
III
should deal
reasons,
with
but
Russia
because
as they
there's
are.
some undetermined moral reason about why Russian sovereignty is more important than Ukrainian sovereignty or Lithuanian
No, this isn't
sovereignty
about
or whoever's
Russian
around
sovereignty,
the fucking country.
right? And
course
it's
it
not
is.
really about Ukrainian sovereignty, as we've already discussed, right?
You don't want to make it about Ukrainian sovereignty.
It's not about it. Ukraine isn't a sovereign country. It's either with America or it's with Russia.
That's not what sovereignty means.
That is what sovereignty means. It's that
Sovereignty,
he who makes
the
final
authority of a state to
decision
govern
is
itself or
sovereign,
another state.
right? No,
all
but
it means.
that's the thing, right? There is no way. I mean, look at what was it that Joe Biden did with the prosecutor? He threatened to withhold
Oh
$1 billion
my God,
until they
please don't
fire the
go into
prosecutor.
the
Right?
fucking Victor Shokin shit.
That's the guy, right? That's being coerced.
You're wrong about the Victor Shokin
Oh,
stuff.
really? What am I wrong about? What did I say?
That call, first of all, that call that he gave with them was 3 months before he was fired, and they didn't fire him because of that. They fired him because Victor Shokin hired his professional chauffeur to be the number 2 lawyer in the state, and it turned out he was blackmailing corporations into giving him diamonds and paintings, and that lawyers for his office broke into his home and they found all this fucking blackmail material he was doing,
Right.
and the fact that Shokin wasn't doing anything about it is what led to him being fired.
Right. So Joe Biden's lying.
Of course he is.
So he's
a politician.
He's just wrong, right? No.
He's trying to play up his own accomplishments.
Right. Okay. And America has no influence in Ukraine in that way. No coercive.
America has
influence in
Ukraine.
Right. So you have coercive influence in Ukraine.
Please, Sargon, can we address this point since we're on it a little bit? Because the socialists often make a point. They say that capitalism is no different than slavery. They say wages are slavery. Opting into an employment contract is really coercive by nature. And typically when we argue against that on the show, we say, no, you can opt in. It's an incentive structure. It's not by force. Slavery is completely different. Slavery is when you abduct somebody and you force them to work for you at gunpoint, basically. It's a hugely different system. But I can't really distinguish the difference between what you're saying about imperialism and what we often say in the capitalist slavery realm. Because it seems like you're saying, imperialism at a bayonet is exactly the same as some sort of incentivized imperialism.
It's coercion either way.
So, but how come you're not on the side of the debate? How come you're not?
The Russians are obviously worse. Adam, just assume whenever anyone talks about Russia, right, that whatever happens in Russia is just worse.
So, but is
Russia is
in
a
the capitalist realm
shithole country?
Okay, so this is what I don't understand, because, and this is where I get into the arguments with the utopian thinking communists. Reality itself is coercive. You have to eat or you die. Okay, that's the ultimate coercion. You have to literally kill an animal and steal its energy to survive.
Yes.
And so it's the same thing with it's better to have a system where you incentivize someone to do something. Say, hey, we think you should do X, and if you don't, then we're not going to give you all this aid money. Or
I'm pro-West.
Okay, then I don't understand the conversation that we're having at all.
Because you're not trying to understand the Russian position.
No, I literally said
we understand
20 million times. I understand the position that you're stating. I just don't think it's morally equivalent.
Okay, but they do.
It is morally equivalent to slavery.
So
morally
what?
justifiable.
Wait, so what?
What do you mean, so what?
The fucking people who want to have drag queen story time for your kids think they're in the morally correct position. So what?
Right, but you are treating Russia like I would treat them. Like they don't deserve any respect. Like they should be crushed.
So?
What do you mean so? This is
what?
leading to the invasion of various places. I really think that America's handling of Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union has been massively counterproductive. It's been insufferable to watch Russia be pushed into the orbit of China, because Russians are Europeans, right? If the Russians were treated with like honey rather than vinegar, right? Attracted with honey rather than vinegar, right? I do think they would have become significantly more liberalized, but berating them for not already being liberal is not the way to do it.
Well, we just disagree. I don't think that was
the solution. That's because you're wrong, okay? It's because you're American.
It's not because because you have a very one-sided view of this.
It's because you're just so you're distant from Europe. You don't understand the cultures here. You don't understand the way the people think.
We're talking about Russia.
We're
not talking about where you live.
Right. So you don't have like a long history in dealing with these things. Like we were fighting Russia like 200 years ago.
Okay, that has nothing to do with what the history of United States-Russian relations have been for the last 20 years.
There's been nothing but antagonistic, really.
That's not true.
And all you can be like is, Obama. Yeah, but half your country didn't agree with that. Your deep state didn't agree.
Clinton had a very positive relationship with Yeltsin. What are you talking about?
No, look at the way things have ramped up.
Under Putin, things have wrapped up in a bad place. I agree.
But it's because of the constant bad faith that America approaches Russia with.
I think we have to
saying we won't expand.
I think we have to fundamentally disagree. Again, we keep oscillating between if America would have just respected Russia more, none of this would have happened. And I think we have to fundamentally just agree to disagree on that, because and we've talked about it on the show. I don't know how much you were listening to. I think Putin is being motivated by the stay in power game, and that the respect game is just subterfuge for it. Well, hold on a second. You can't come on and say that we don't understand the Russian perspective. We're just stupid Americans. You're going to explain it to us, and then not care about the psychoanalyzing of the Russian perspective. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, why don't we just
it's not even it's not psychoanalysis. It's Dictator's Handbook.
Well, yeah, but that is psychoanalysis in a form. But why don't
it's not. It's just how dictators stay in power.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're assuming that there is a threat internally to Putin's power, and Russians that I know just say there isn't.
There's
Okay, so there's no point.
Is one man an island? Is one man a king? Of course not.
No man rules
Putin,
alone.
He's an autocrat, isn't he?
No man rules alone.
He has to pay people to do shit for him.
Of course he does.
Okay.
Right, but that doesn't
then he has to shore that up.
So what? He spent 30 years doing that. Putin
Russia's
expanded Russia's influence.
Russia is in an economic decline, even before 2014. Was in an economic decline. The population is fucking. Yeah. They're literally lying about their birth rates. Yeah, because their fucking birth rates are so low. Yeah. Okay, I don't believe the kind of John Mieschmeyer idea that if we just said, "Hey, if America just said we're not going to do anything," that Russia would just sink off into obscurity and die a slow death, and that Putin wouldn't start lashing out and taking over other countries when he needs to. I don't believe that was ever a realistic world, because he's going to have to start shoring up his own power base when he starts running out of money, when Ukraine starts threatening the fact that they're going to be a competitor in the oil market, when Georgia starts threatening that they're going to be a competitor in the oil market, which is Putin's main source of economic influence and power. Of course, he's going to start taking over these countries and attacking them.
I would have to check that, frankly. Okay. But, I don't know how much oil is a major export of Russia's. But I mean, I know gas is a huge export to Europe, but and wheat as well, of course. But
is capitalism a positive force in the world? I mean, that's part of this too.
Subject, Adam. Right.
Well, no, that is part of this. This really is. I mean, when you're talking about Western liberal democracies, yeah, but they don't. They don't have a capitalist system. They don't.
No, they've got a thugocracy. It's a kleptocracy.
Yes, it's a kleptocracy. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Right. That's not the question. The question is one of national pride for the Russians, right? I don't think they would have been invading countries. I think what they would have done is bribing countries, like they did with Ukraine, incidentally. There are examples of them doing this. And this is basically just the American model, right?
Well,
but just from the Russian perspective.
I'm bringing up the capitalism thing because it is a source of national pride. When your country is destitute without economic power, of course you're going to lose national pride, but that's like a meritocracy argument.
Yeah, but with the bribing thing. So in 2014, when Russia, or 2013, when Russia starts bribing Ukraine, the Ukrainian, and it works on Yanukovych, the Ukrainian people like lose their fucking shit on it. They lose their mind over it, and they protest, and that's what leads to him getting ousted of power. You know, the United States didn't come in there and remove Yanukovych from power or anything like that. Again, this was their decision.
I'm not saying they did.
We don't like our corrupt politicians.
I know, right? But the problem is that the last 30 years have been Russia getting more and more desperate.
Yes, because of mismanagement by Putin. Putin has had his boot on the Russian people for the last 20 years. It's a kleptocracy.
It's a kleptocracy. So saying Putin, right, who would you replace him with?
Well, listen, you can't even have that conversation.
You literally got nowhere, right?
Listen, I'm not. That's not my decision to make.
I think even fucking Medvedev would have been a better president than Putin.
I don't know, but we basically would have to accept that Russia is run like this.
Why do we have to accept that?
Because it's just the way Russia is.
No, I can accept it. It doesn't mean
a strong civil society like the West does.
Okay.
We didn't have a strong civil society at one time.
Yes, we did. No, there's never been a time where England and America haven't had strong civil society. This is the weakest our civil societies have ever been.
It was a monarchy at one point. What are you talking about?
Oh, Adam.
That's no different. That is no different than an autocracy.
Oh, I swear to God, you're trolling me.
How is it any different?
You're getting his British sensibilities up.
No, it's more that, like, listening to America.
There was a before a Magna Carta and an after the Magna Carta, correct?
It was a monarchy both times.
Okay, well, pluralism, expanding
a period of republicanism.
Expanding political power to the population unleashes economic power, and economic power is what makes countries respected and powerful around the world. Putin has never unleashed that in his population because it's a kleptocracy.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that there was a significant increase in standard of living under Putin in the 2000s to like 2010s, wasn't there?
From the Soviet Union, yes, he managed to save them, but they have been stagnant for the last 20 years. They're in danger of being Venezuela because so much of their economy runs on the price of oil.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that, like, repeated sanctions don't help, right? But this is the problem, is that we are expecting Russia to be something that it's not and punishing it for not being that thing. Now, I'm not saying Russia's good. I'm not saying Russia should invade anything or anything like that. But I do think it is a predictable consequence that if we continue treating the Russians like this, that this is the result we get. And it seems that we could have engineered the situation through more savvy diplomacy to simply not have had this consequence, but that would mean that the American empire doesn't continue expanding eastwards. Well, that doesn't seem that unreasonable to me. And it seems to be ideological on the American perspective, as in we want everyone to live under a liberal democracy. For that's the impetus to go forward on that. Right?
It's the European perspective. It's not just America. Okay.
No,
coming out of the Cold War, we had 60, 70 years of the war being on the brink of global annihilation, and Europe and America saying, listen, between us, we've been relatively at peace. We want to have the rest of Europe be at peace. And if there's countries that are coming off the Soviet Union that want to become liberal democracies, which are more stable countries that aren't going to go to nuclear war with each other, then we're going to open up our arms.
Okay, but they're not hatchlings. They're not just They didn't just pop out of nowhere. They've got histories. And they've got
I understand, and they all changed, apparently. Whatever their history was, they all changed and accepted living under a Western democracy system.
And one of those is with Russia. And so being aggressive and belligerent about it is going to engender a reaction from the Russians, right? And so that's what we have to consider. And if you don't consider that, what you're saying is the Russians don't matter, and if they do anything, we're going to go to war with them. But the thing is, what we've seen is that America actually isn't going to go to war with the Russians over Eastern Europe. So in a way, you're kind of selling these people up the fucking river, right?
The problem is when you say we're being belligerent to Russia, okay, and what that translates to is to saying we can't have countries near Russia adopt non-Russian ways of thinking and behaving.
Totally.
They can't enter into the American sphere of influence. Yeah, I agree.
It's not America, it's European.
It is America. It's America's. NATO is America's project.
It's underpinned
by America.
How did Europe have the ability to nix what George W. Bush wanted if it's just America?
I'm not saying it's an autocracy, if that's what
that's what you're kind of implying.
No, it's your sphere of influence, right? It's your imperial presence in the world.
Is America and Europe the same thing? Are we just one giant monster?
It depends in what dimension you're talking. I mean, if you're talking militarily, pretty much.
Okay, so why does Europe?
I mean, that's what NATO is.
But this is part of what I think is the problem with the framing, because we say, oh, what does America care about Ukraine? America's across the sea. It's not just America that cares here. It's Europe, and they're right fucking there too. They're on the other side of that border.
Yeah, but the European Union is an expansionist imperial project of its own. It's got dreams of world empire of its own.
Okay.
There are documents in the European on the European Parliament's website that you can see how they're planning to form a European army to project power into Africa and Asia. It's like, no, you fuck nuts. That's a terrible idea. Right?
Is that army a security force, or is it for imperialistic purposes?
I'm quoting them to project power into Asia and Africa.
Well, you can't have a free market environment without security. Security is like step one.
Assuming that's
okay.
I don't know.
But what I'm saying is that they're an imperial project.
Right.
They expand like they're an imperial project, and they're constantly searching for more centralization.
Yeah, but why? So what?
It's relevant.
So what?
Why do
we're an imperialist project? That's what the European Union is.
Why? No, but this is what I don't understand. Why does the world have to suffer the weight of what the Russian people want in terms of building their empire, but we can criticize the EU for wanting to build their empire?
No, I'm not in favor of Russia building their empire, right? What I'm saying...
You're saying we have to abide by it.
No, what I'm saying is it exists. So your choices are two. You either respect that fact or you crush it.
It feels like you're sort of visualizing this as if Russia is basically this wild animal, this mad dog, and Europe and America are like sophisticated humans with free will and rational choice. And they just have to say, well, there's this crazy fucking animal here that doesn't have free will, so you just got to put it down or let it murder all the animals around it.
Yeah, because Russia's
let's domesticate it. I think it would make a nice pet.
Okay, well...
No. That's precisely the perspective, Adam, right? It would have been nice to do that, but unfortunately it's been put in an increasingly small cage. It's not in any Haitian position to start. The elephant is totally in control of Russia, right? It's not going to change its mind.
I have another relevant.
It's biting everything around it, right? And it's like, look, if you just not put it in such a small cage, maybe it wouldn't be biting everything. And the thing is, it's really easy for us to be like, oh, look at that evil dog, because we're the ones with the world empire. We're the ones with all of the wealth and influence and the prestige of being.
Why do we have that wealth and influence?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Carl, I want to ask an objective question.
It doesn't matter.
Carl, I want to ask.
I'm not
Carl,
let me argue that Russia has a better fucking system.
I know.
Adam.
Okay.
That I'm not arguing that.
I have a variation of that question. I want to ask: do you think people in general would rather live under a capitalist system or a socialist system?
Oh, I think they'd rather have belly rubs and head pats.
So
whatever you think.
So you don't think the population? You don't think the population has one system would be more advantageous to the population?
Look, there's a rabid dog biting everyone. We could have prevented this.
Okay, if you don't want to answer the question, you don't have to.
Just answer it, Adam.
No, but
I think framing, man.
The rabid dog cannot be prevented from biting everyone. It's in its nature. It's the scorpion and the frog. It's in its fucking nature.
Okay, I shouldn't have said rabid then. I should have said the caged dog. Okay,
we could domesticate the dog.
Yeah, we could have done.
Capitalism is what domesticates the dog.
To domesticate the dog, basically, like, and you can find loads of foreign policy analysts who would say, look, there is actually a good reason to not try and incorporate Ukraine. There's actually a good reason for America not to be meddling there. And in fact, that might well have prevented a lot of this problem. Like, there are lots of these foreign policy analysts, and no one wants to listen to them because this is Russian talking, but this is pro-Russia. It's like, well, I mean, I guess when everything has been so anti-Russia for such a long time, giving Russia a modicum of sympathy sounds like being pro-Russia.
So when in, I think it was 2008 or whatever, when Yushchenko, the current president of Ukraine, approaches EU and they talk about setting up this, favorable trade deal, and then and the EU says, okay, here's like the pathway to do that trade deal. And then 2011, when directly asked about this, Medvedev says, Ukraine's a sovereign nation. They can make their own decisions about this. It will affect relationship with, our trade relations, but they can make their own decision. We're not their keeper. Okay. So everything seems to be on board. And then when Putin becomes president, he says, fuck you, you're not having this trade deal with EU. Mm-hmm. They just have to abide by that. That's the dog being caged in.
Well, what are you going to do about it?
You say, fuck you, no.
Okay, now it's war. So you don't respect it, so you're going to war.
Okay. So that's war. Okay,
then you're going to...
That's Ukraine's choice. Right? They decide to go to war with Russia right now.
Yeah, but
that's what's happening
what
right
you're
now.
saying is that you are okay with America going to war with Russia over this, right?
No, I don't want a nuclear war.
Look, I'm not even against like the idea of America enforcing its global hegemonic decisions. Right? If you're going to make them, fucking make them. Right? But Biden has led them totally up the path. Right? Zelensky is currently going around, all the world leaders going, look, could you please go to war with Russia because we're getting fucking pasted? Right? And they're not going to. They're absolutely not going to, because this was an adventure, essentially. This was like a speculative expansion of the Western sphere of influence.
No, it's because going to direct war with Russia is not a feasible option. That's why.
Why is it not?
Because no one wants a nuclear fucking holocaust.
Then you shouldn't have been in Ukraine.
Okay, so we just say that's what. So what's what you're saying? Because
yes, that's what the Russians are saying.
No, but that's what you're saying. You're saying if a nuclear power wants to do something, everyone just has to say, "Oh, whatever, let them do it," because they're a nuclear power.
It depends what it is.
Well, but why? Why is it as long as the
because that's how geopolitics works, man.
No, because as long as under the framework you're laying out, as long as the cost does not mean nuclear holocaust, that's always the better choice to make. As long as that's
Russia's at the ante.
And are we allowed to? Are we at least allowed to argue against it with our words? Is that
of course? Russia invading Ukraine is horrible. It's bad, right? But acting like this is like nothing to do with America's influence is just wrong. And it's a lie. It's not true.
It has to do with America's influence and that America exists and Ukraine wants to be more closely aligned with EU borders, and America. Yes.
Right? That's the problem.
It's expanding its cultural influence because its cultural influence is successful. People like it.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. Very successful.
Sure.
It's successful. Yeah.
And you're not prepared to enforce it.
We're not. Yes, we're not.
Yeah, we don't have to enforce it. You got to understand.
You do, otherwise Ukrainians die. But you don't care about Ukraine.
No, the option here is that you're saying that the EU should have told Ukraine to fuck off. They said, listen, we don't. Even though Russia currently is saying it's okay for you to have trade relations with us, okay, the fear of a nuclear war is too great for us to even consider having a trade deal with you, so no, fuck you.
Well, look, Konstantin Kisin thinks that Putin absolutely would use nukes if he felt he needed to. Yeah. And they've upped the ante to hard, hot war, right? They're literally sending in hundreds of thousands of men, tanks, and they're going to take the capital probably fairly soon, right? Like they have upped the fucking ante. They're saying, look, we're not going to play soft diplomacy anymore. You've gone far enough as far as we're concerned. You've broken promises to us as far as we're concerned. We consider you to be an empire of lies. And Joe Biden has fucking cucked. He's totally caved and been like, yeah, okay, Ukrainians. I mean, we're going to send you aid, obviously, but, you're on your own, right? We're not going to provide you air cover, and without the air cover in a modern war, you're fucked, right?
So do you,
and
you
this
think
is what
America
the Redditors have been learning hard
send their
and
military
fast, really
Ukraine?
immediately, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is just who is prepared to up the ante over Ukraine? And it turns out Russia is, because Ukraine is on the Russian border.
So do you think America, NATO should send troops into Ukraine?
No, I think we should not be in Ukraine. I don't think we have a business in Ukraine.
Okay. So just let them fall under Russia's control, basically.
They've always been under Russia's control.
Mm-hmm.
So let them continue to not have their own decisions.
Yes, because otherwise the power with the most nuclear weapons in all the world is going to enter into a hot war with whoever's challenging them. That's
okay,
correct.
then just say that from the beginning. Say we shouldn't do anything because they're nuclear
I have
power.
said that. I've
Is
said
there-
that.
You kept saying that you had some further argument that I never got to the bottom of.
But we shouldn't be trying to continue to advance up to Russia's borders. They're not like us.
We're not
like
advancing
us.
to their borders.
We absolutely are.
Do you accept the difference between a cultural influence and a military taking over a country and influencing and expanding its borders?
NATO is a form of imperialism as far as the Russians are concerned. I'm inclined to agree.
Okay, well, I'm inclined to disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how? How would you disagree?
How is it defense?
Like, literally, it's a defense pact that which, if this is the fucking foreign policy question that's always been asked: is NATO prepared to go to war? Is America prepared to go to war over Latvia? Right? As it's fucking preposterous. The idea that America is going to go into a nuclear war with Russia over some piddling Eastern European country is preposterous, right? But that's the promise that's on the table.
If you want to make the sole argument that because of the threat of nuclear war, we're just going to sacrifice these countries to Russia, then that's fine. Make that argument. But you keep trying to make this different argument that, like, the American empire is expanding, NATO is part of this imperialistic force moving towards Russia, that you have to look at it from the Russian perspective, blah, 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 blah. No, that's all fucking irrelevant to the actual argument that you're making.
I think all of these things are relevant.
It's not, though, because all you're saying is, listen, is America going to go to war over Latvia? That's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is provoking a rival empire.
So, yeah, but this is the problem with that attitude. Because if America says, okay, listen, we're not willing to go to nuclear war with Latvia, so Russia takes Latvia, and then they take Ukraine, and then they take, they take Georgia, they take all the surrounding countries until, guess what? 50 years later, Cold War 2.0 is back, baby.
Yeah,
because Russia's
really
managed to regain all its power, and we're back on the fucking brink of global nuclear war again.
Yeah, it was a really bad strategy to expand NATO. It should have been.
No, I'm saying if there's no NATO expansion. You throw NATO out of the fucking window, okay?
But that you can't separate NATO from what's happening.
No, I'm saying.
Oh my God!
If you say that if NATO disbands, okay, when the Soviet Union falls, I don't believe for a second that Russia is not going to just start gobbling up countries again.
Of course.
Why?
Because they need to.
No, I don't agree that they do need to. Right? I don't. They will expand soft power into these countries. That's true.
Well, you want us to pull our soft power back as well. So, I mean, there will be no
our
opposition.
Soft power has provoked this. And I'm not saying it's wrong either.
And so wait. So when Russia's soft power goes all the way back to expanding up to the borders of Germany once again.
Yeah, then the Russians will be in the wrong.
And we're back exactly where we fucking started, 50, 60 years ago.
Yes. No.
And we say, we get to say, and America gets to say, well, at least we're not
in the wrong. The Soviet
Union
Union was hard power. Right? It wasn't soft power like America. Okay. Mm-hmm. The Soviet Union. So don't mix.
But that's the difference. What America has shown that it doesn't exert soft power on democracy in democratic countries, and then say, oh, by the way, fuck you. The way Russia's engaging in Ukraine right now.
I think it does.
Okay.
I think that the Americans have a very rosy-eyed view of themselves.
We've been arguing, I think, for about an hour. Do you guys want to give some final thoughts, or?
Well, I still don't even understand why. Like, this just seems so counter to so much of all the points that you've had and that we've had about not engaging in cultural moral relativism for the last 5 years, and it's weird to hear these arguments. It's
not appropriate to have cultural moral relativism in someone's country, right? It should be the culture of the country, the established traditional culture of the country, that is the hegemonic culture, that is the barometer by which things are measured.
But how do you measure that?
Well, however, in debate, in public opinion, whatever, right?
You don't have that in Russia, though.
That's literally what Russia's doing. They're saying Ukraine has to be part of our culture.
Yeah, exactly. That's the Russian paradigm. And that's appropriate in Russia, but it's not appropriate over here, right? But that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is rival empires on the geopolitical map. And this is the problem that the Russians have. They are prepared now to up the ante way past soft power. And the Americans have actually folded their cards. They've folded their hand on this. And it's actually like it seems that you might actually be right, that this is setting the stage for a further increase in Russian military aggression. Whereas this could have, I think, all have been avoided if it had been dealt with through diplomacy and soft power without taking ex-Soviet satellite states into NATO with such speed, frankly. Like, I'm not surprised the Russians feel afraid.
Ukraine was not going to join NATO anytime soon.
So what?
But that's what I mean. So what? That's the conversation. They want
it to. They want it to.
Once Russia fucking invaded the country,
they've wanted it for decades.
People, certain politicians in Ukraine wanted it because they wanted the security guarantee. Yes.
And in America,
certain politicians in America wanted it, yes.
Yeah, okay. And so from the Russian geostrategic position, they're not like, well, it hasn't happened yet, therefore I won't do anything, right? There's a constant game of forces moving.
So they're going to push them in that direction. That's a real genius idea.
Say again?
Russia's going to push Ukraine further in that direction. Doesn't seem like the smart idea.
Oh, they don't care. They're just going to invade with tanks.
Okay.
Like they have.
Right.
But it didn't have to be that way. As you said, before the invasion of Crimea, the Ukrainians weren't like super pro EU or anything, right? But it's because
I said they weren't super pro NATO. They weren't.
NATO. Sorry, yeah. They weren't super pro NATO, and there we go. Right. This all could have been avoided, but I do think there's been a constant ratcheting of pressure, a constant demonization of Russia, a total lack of respect for the fact that Russia has interests. It is legitimate for Russia to have interests.
No one is saying that it's not. I
really feel like you are.
Carl, I can't. I know you might think
you're not, but I really think you are.
I can't get past the fact that you're casting economic incentives and full-scale war as this on the same playing field, on this at the same moral level. For me, I mean, that's the exact same thing that the communists do, the socialists do all the time.
This is because you've never read Clausewitz, isn't it?
You are the one putting it. Does he make a compelling argument for why they're the same?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe the socialists should read that, because the socialists are the ones that are always making this stupid argument. Okay,
war is politics by other means. Like, ultimately, the question is who can enforce it. And the Russians are saying, we're going to enforce it. And the Americans have said, we're not going to enforce it.
Yes, but fundamentally, I would rather live in a world, and I feel other people would agree with me, where incentives, while still coercive, were incentives and not, I will kill you if you don't do what I say. It's not slavery, subjugation, oppression.
But there are people in the world who do think that way.
Yes, I mean, Russia, Putin. Yes, that's one of them. That's why that's why we're not on his side.
Right. So, are you going to go to war with him?
If we have to, sure.
I guess.
We don't have
to, right? You say
we don't have to yet. It's not up to us. If the Ukrainian people,
Ukraine is just open for Russian.
If the Ukrainian people want to lay down their arms and say, "Okay, we submit to Russian rule," that's their choice to do that. But they decided to fight back.
Yeah.
Okay? Right. They decided to fight and die for something they believe in, which I guess is not an admirable position anymore, which is very strange.
Ukrainian debate aside, Carl, I can't get over the fact that you're saying. I really want
to change the subject on this because I really think this is important, right? Right. No, hang on.
But you're saying they're equivalent. This is what I was saying about you guys. We'll never get past that.
No, this is what I'm saying about you guys selling them up the river, right? The American influence, the American hegemony in NATO, right? It's very appealing, and it's saying to them, "Hey, look, you can just join us, and it'll be fine. Join NATO, come closer to our orbit, and everything will be fine." Mm-hmm. And as soon as Russia puts down their foot and uses hard power, you're like, well, it's valiant that you're defending your country. Good luck, lads. That's actually terrible, right? Because I am actually very sympathetic to the
that
Ukrainians.
argument would be true.
In a very hang on. In a very concrete manner, there is genuine heroism being demonstrated by the Ukrainians, right? And it's kind of sad watching them being the kind of useful idiots of the Americans in this. It should never have come to this.
If America or NATO had gone to Ukraine and said, hey, if Russia invades you, we're going to have your back. We're going to bring in American and NATO troops in your country. And then when Russia invades and we say, oh, just kidding, then I would agree with you. That'd be like one of the most fucking morally disgusting actions
ever. I get the feeling that
nothing like that was even remotely happened from day one of this conflict. Even when America started giving the Ukrainian military and Ukraine weapons in November, they made it very clear that they weren't going to get into a fucking hot war with Russia. They made it super clear they weren't going to get into a hot war with Russia.
But now Zelensky is running around begging world leaders to do it.
Of course he is. People are fucking dying. Of course he's going to start advocating for this stuff.
Well, no, why would... No, I think that he thought that he could rope the West into fighting.
I don't know what he thinks, if he can do it or not.
Well, I mean, the actions that he's taking indicate to me that he seems to think that he can get the West to fight for him.
You're suggesting that he and the Ukrainian people thought that America and NATO were going to land troops in there in case Russia invaded. And I don't think that was ever thought by anyone.
I don't know. I think that he was expecting something. I think he's begging for it. So,
should I read some super chats?
Arms out the fucking ass.
That's not enough. It's not good enough.
Ostrissy for $20 says, much like Spoon debate, talking with Sargon will do nothing if they honestly have the position that NATO, U.S. is just as bad as Russia. There is no way to bridge that divide. Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
That's a retarded comment. That's just a retarded comment.
Okay.
That's it. Like, no one's saying it's just as bad as. Obviously, it's superior to live in NATO, right? But that doesn't change the fact that Russia exists and it's not a part of NATO.
Yeah, well, that doesn't... Listen, I'm making a clear distinction here between slavery and capitalism. And you're basically saying that, well, slavery exists, so, capitalism is great and everything, but you have to respect the right of the slave owners. Right. And I'm going, no, fuck the slave owners. Stop saying
slavery, Adam, please. This is not slavery.
What is it when you come in and force your will on people with
subjugation?
Tanks?
Right? That's not slavery. Slavery is something different. Okay? We are not talking about slavery. What we are talking about is geopolitical influence. Right? And you can sit there and go, well, wouldn't it be nicer if? And it's like, yeah, it'd be lovely if.
It's incentives. It's incentives versus force. It's very clear.
You've shown
what is it? The NAP, the non-aggression principle. It's the non-aggression principle versus the tanks.
Who cares? It doesn't matter. What matters is what's actually happening. And what's actually happening is that the Americans are not backing up these high ideals with force. And force is the final deciding factor.
Yes, and that's why they were trying to get into NATO. Right now, we're not obligated to commit any kind of force.
Anyway, let's carry on.
Philip B. for 1999 says, Sargon sounds like that Caleb writing a poem about if he was his mom. Oh, the suffering.
Wait, what is he writing?
I don't know what that is.
You should read these. I'm a terrible reader, Sitch. Yeah. You're falling down on your job here. I searched Sargon just to go back to the ones.
Reverse order. Brando Commando for $20 says Sargon. Sergei Lavrov literally said in 2014 that the reunification of Germany wasn't legitimate because there never was a referendum. Putin literally called other Slavic countries scum and traitors for siding with the West.
Yep. What's that meant to be a rebuttal to? This is what I'm talking about. Like, they view themselves as a people. They view these things as a civilizational quest. But you guys don't understand that.
They view other countries turning away from their influence and their ideology as and I agree with you, as disrespectful and turning away from, the Russian order, and they don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't give them any moral weight,
right?
whatsoever.
Yeah, but you show no respect to it. And it's fine if you don't respect it, but I'm telling you, either respect it or you crush it.
Okay.
Like, these are your options, and you're like, well, we're not going to crush it. It's like, well, then you're going to get people killed.
That's up to the Ukrainian people. If NATO lied, if America and NATO lied to Ukraine, then I would agree with you. That didn't happen.
I think the lie is implicit here.
What does the crush it option look like, Carl? Because I'm curious. I feel like we are doing the crush it option, but with incentives instead of force.
Right.
No, I mean, that's
what you said was the same thing earlier, but I guess it's not now.
You've got the arena of soft power, which is where incentives come in.
Right.
And then when one side ups the ante into hard power,
we're forced to do hard power.
Wait. Then don't call us both the empires then. If you're making this distinction between soft and hard power, don't say we're the American NATO empire versus the Russian empire here.
The American empire has lots of hard power. It just refuses to use it because of the unforeseeable
but not using this hard power on these Eastern European countries that want to join NATO, that want to be part of the EU or want to be part of NATO.
Sorry, say again.
I said the Eastern European countries are not. We're not exercising hard power against these countries.
I'm not saying
so. It's not an empire the way Russia is.
No.
Or wants to be.
You, both you and Russia were trying to buy off the country to join your sphere of influence. It didn't work. But the thing is, this was inappropriate. Like, there's no reason that Ukraine should be in America's sphere of influence. There's just no reason.
The European sphere of influence again.
Yeah, but there's no reason for it. Right?
Well, the people want it to be. What do you mean?
Can totally make an argument. And Putin did. Did you watch David Starkey's video about Putin's position?
I don't know who David Starkey is.
Right, okay, I'll take that as a no, obviously. But basically, Putin has a historical narrative that he is fulfilling here, right? Which is why this is not an unpopular war in Russia. Like, they are doing something on a civilizational basis. And this, like, you guys are just speculating in Eastern Europe, and
you're speculating as well. I mean, that's not a fair assessment.
No.
It just doesn't matter.
I mean, you're gambling, not that with you're gambling in Eastern Europe, right? You're seeing what you can grab, right, and see where the Russians have said, no, this is our line, and we're going to fucking enforce it with hard power. We're upping the ante now. What are you going to do? And Biden's already been like, we're not going in. We're not fighting over it. We're not going to a major war with a major power over Ukraine. Sorry, Ukrainians. Good luck, Zelensky. And it's not good. Yeah. That's not good. You shouldn't have got to this point.
Okay, so again, all these countries should the EU should just say, fuck you. America just say, fuck you. If you want to become like us, if you want to have trade negotiations with us, no, we're not going to do it because of some fear that 20 years down the road, Russia's going to invade you.
No one's saying you can't have trade relations or diplomatic relations.
Russia said that specifically.
The 2014 situation.
Okay,
that's exactly what Russia said.
Maybe they are then. Okay, fine. Right. What I think the main problem though is the very concept of NATO. Right, to be able to put American weapons closer and closer to Russia is something that freaks the Russians out. I think they're very afraid of this.
It freaks the elites out. It freaks Putin out. That's for sure.
I think it probably freaks them out.
I don't buy that there's a fear. As this is even demonstrated. I mean, there's a fear that NATO is going to invade the country of Russia. I don't think that's Putin's fear. I don't think that's anyone's fear.
They say it. Like
I know he says it. That's because it's bullshit. It's the bullshit narrative. Of course he's going to say it. Right. Wait, how is this exact situation not demonstrating that NATO isn't going to invade Russia?
Oh, it's a good example of how NATO turns out to be a paper tiger. You're not going to go.
So then I guess why fears were not justified, and he can pull out of Ukraine, and none of this has to happen because it turns out NATO is just a paper tiger.
Why? Why not just keep on crushing NATO?
Well, because if the whole thing is the fear of NATO, and it turns out NATO's not going to do shit, then why does it matter?
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's no reason that they wouldn't just carry on doing what they did.
But if their basis for carrying on is the fear of NATO invading, and NATO shows it's not going to invade, then they've lost their primary motivation to do what they're doing.
Yeah, NATO's not even going to protect Ukraine.
It's not that NATO can't invade, right? It's not that NATO can't do things. And what, saying that, look, we're just going to have weapons on your borders, I mean, or in the nearest NATO country, but we're not going to do anything. I mean, maybe tomorrow NATO will. Who knows? We don't know. Okay. Right? So why take the risk?
Become the Knight for $20 says, Sargon, you are way off on this. Jeffrey Dahmer is a far more sympathetic serial killer than a lot of the previous ones. We should just respect his choices. It's an improvement.
Small-brained interpretation.
It's
just not.
I'm only reading the $20 ones for Sargon.
Okay.
Sitch, are you doing the same?
Ostry for $20 says Sargon is cast in the U.S. NATO as humans beating and caging a dog and the dog biting back in response. How in that description is U.S. NATO not worse?
Well, worse, again, it depends what you mean by worse, really, doesn't it? Right? If you mean has provoked this, as in has speculated its way into this, then yeah, I think that was a mistake. I don't think we should have done this. And I think the Ukrainians are the ones who are going to suffer for it as well.
Alexi Time for $20 says, Carl won me over when he cited the host of trigonometry. This is why he's equal to Vosh. They are both somewhat intelligent, but are so lazy and arrogant that they can't be bothered to put any research into their argument.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if they're talking about you or the host of trigonometry.
Like, literally speaking to Russians about the opinion of Russians in Russia.
Kabomi,
how is that not valid?
Kabomi for $20 says Sargon has an unrealistic moral expectation of feminists. Well, okay.
I mean, that's probably true, I suppose. Jesus.
Yeah.
I expected feminists could be moral.
There you go.
Alexi Thyme for $20 says Sargon, Russians misunderstood, Muslims evil, political affiliations aside. Sargon equal Vosh. Have you ever read Loki? It's actually Locke, I know, but meme time, right? Have you ever read Locke?
Well, that's what's his face? Warski.
Yeah.
Loki. But no, Muslims aren't evil. Russians, I don't think they're misunderstood. I think it's just Americans don't understand. I know that sounds a contradiction, but it's, again, whose perspective are you taking?
You've always been someone who is not afraid to say cultural relativism is bullshit, and that we believe
have a better culture than Russia.
Yeah, that's why I'm mystified here. I'm mystified here when people want to join our culture because it rocks of their own volition, and you're basically making the case that the elite should tell them, no, we shouldn't do that because there's this big bully that'll beat us up if we don't. If we
that's
don't,
what I'm saying.
Stay away from their culture.
If you're prepared to crush them, then do it. If you're not prepared to crush them, then act accordingly.
Well, I mean, it's a iterated game, so the crushing isn't.
Well, but again, so if
time,
if it was 100% clear, which I believe it was, because I can't imagine this conversation happened in November when America is giving Ukraine all its weapons. If Zelensky knows with 100% certainty, the U.S. says, "Hey, we're not going to put NATO or American troops in Ukraine, even if Russia invades," and he says, "That's fine. We're still going to fight, though." I mean, does that change any of your opinion on any of this?
Well, I mean, I'm not for Russia invading Ukraine, right?
No, but in terms of like,
I hope the Ukrainians fight them off, but I don't think they're going to.
No, I understand, but I mean, in terms of like whether countries, have a right to say, okay, we want to be more closely aligned with Europe or America, even if that means that there's a threat of Russia. We'll roll the dice. Because you're kind of saying that America's rolling the dice, but it's really these Eastern European countries rolling the dice, and I'm saying that that's their right to make that decision to gamble. I agree. Okay, but what we're doing, I think, is incentivizing them, as Adam's been saying, to join us. And I think that's actually
by being cool as fuck.
Yeah, but also by giving them money and by taking money from their
because we have money at our disposal because we're a fucking wealthy. Dynamic economy, free
but
economy.
Our elites are also looting their country, right? So,
not to the same extent as Putin.
Sure, but that doesn't mean that our elites aren't looting their country. So, like,
Jeff Bezos,
the gain of like Hunter Biden,
Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, he's looting our country.
Hang on,
Bill Gates looting our country.
No. Who is it? Romney? Was it Pelosi and Biden? And there's another one. They've all got like children or like nephews or something on the board of Burisma. It's fucking amazing how openly corrupt it is.
There is
not looting the country, though.
That is absolutely looting the country. No, there's no way Hunter Biden's earned a fucking penny of that Ukrainian money.
Corruption is not looting the country.
Of course it is. Okay. It's the same as looting.
Right? No. Looting the country is stealing its resources for your own country's benefit.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Right.
Okay.
So
No way.
That's exactly what
Burisma's trying to buy influence from America and Europe. Okay, that's not the same as America, Europe looting the country.
It's the same as Biden and the elite of America looting Ukraine. And I think they've been led up the garden path by a few false promises that have failed to materialize. But we can't prove it because this is all behind closed doors. But there's no other reason that Zelensky would act like he's been betrayed, basically. And he's going around saying, come on, you've got to close the skies, you've got to save us. Well, why would he think that was going to happen?
His people
because he wants murdered. What do you? Yeah, because it's just like I'll tell you why. I talked to my family members who a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I had this exact conversation with my father like a few days ago, where I said I don't like that the U.S. media is pushing to have a no-fly zone in in Russia, because this is going to spark World War III. And I say this to him last week or whenever I talk to him, and he's like, oh, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think it's totally irresponsible. And then a couple of days ago, I talked to him, and he's like completely reversed his position, because he's like, oh, I see all these videos of all the tragedy and destroyed buildings and blah, blah, blah. That's why Zelensky's doing what he's doing. He's hoping that people will change their mind, because they'll look at all the fucking chaos that's occurring.
Of course he is. But, I would have thought that someone in Zelensky's position would have been informed enough to know that probably wasn't going to happen, and it seems irresponsible, right?
Oh my God, what's he supposed to do? Jump up on the cross and hammer himself in?
They are trying to negotiate with Russia.
No, but I mean, he essentially should capitulate at this point.
But to what? What though?
Because negotiation with Russia.
Because originally Russia's demands were insane.
Sure, but the thing is, the Ukrainians aren't without a bargaining position, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's not like, the Ukrainian army's been wiped out. It's not like they don't have men and munitions or anything like this. And so, Russia may well have strong demands, but this is what negotiation is. But
Ukraine, so far Russia's they've lessened their negotiation terms to just being the exact thing they wanted before they invaded. So they're not really Russia's not negotiating anything.
Well, again, it depends what you consider I think that if Zelensky were to essentially admit defeat at this point, and I'm not saying that's heroic, obviously.
He would have to leave the country.
Possibly. It's entirely possible.
Or he'd probably have to turn himself in, I imagine. But
possibly. And it's entirely possible that Putin would kill him if he did. So,
or he'd be in a Russian prison for the rest of his life.
Probably best to flee. But the alternative is Ukrainians dying, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So I don't think they're going to win this war, and I don't think America's going to come in. So what's the responsible thing to do here?
I don't know, because first of all, I don't trust any reporting about what's actually happening.
Yeah, me too.
On the ground when it comes to the military stuff. I don't know anything that's happening. So I don't know if anyone does. Yeah, so I don't know if because I would agree with you. If I'm Zelensky and it's just entirely hopeless. Okay, if I'm Zelensky and it's entirely hopeless and we're just getting massacred and we're just delaying the inevitable, hoping that America's going to swoop in and save the day, which is not likely to ever fucking occur, then I would capitulate. But I don't know if that's the situation.
Well, I think it might be, because it seems that the Russians basically have Kiev surrounded at this point, right? And it seems that Zelensky is desperately begging world leaders to get involved at this point. He's done the little tour of, video conference calls with parliaments.
I mean, he's doing that from day one, though.
Yeah, but he seems really desperate now. The rhetoric that he used is different. The American one than the British one slightly. And who knows what he's going to say to Israel, right? And so it just seems like the situation is worsening for Zelensky. And the thing about the Russian military tactics, again, haven't really changed in 300 years. It's just going to be a continual slow grind until the enemy is worn down sufficiently. The Russians have never cared about casualties, and I don't think they're going to start now.
Right.
So it's just one of those things. There's kind of inevitable doom about the Russian war machine, and I don't see how he escapes this, right? And unless we're totally misinformed about troop dispositions and stuff like that, but the maps that you see going around are fairly consistent. You know, like they've got the area above Crimea, the sort of eastern swathe, and then the two pincer movements going down to Kiev. So I'm guessing there's something like that. I think Zelensky's position is pretty untenable. It's just a matter of time. Who knows? Though, you know,
Dr. Diddler,
wrong.
Dr. Diddler for $20 says, nope, Japan dismantled their shogun and adopted a parliamentary before World War II because they saw how advanced America was and changed themselves to copy Europe. Try again, Sargon, but without the snobbery and inaccuracy.
Yeah, but the reason that they've capitulated to America is because of the nukes. Like they would have had a high-handed approach to themselves. Like they've only just started rebuilding a military, haven't they?
Was it better for them though in the long run?
Oh, I mean, it's better for everyone, I think.
Okay.
I think nuking Japan was justified.
Triple J for $20 says.
You skipped one.
Oh, I did.
Sorry.
Drew Cox for $20 says, this conversation would benefit greatly from an understanding of international relations theory. Whether or not you respect a justification is irrelevant. Of course, we wouldn't agree with any justification. I mean, I thought we covered that several times, which is that, you know, I understand Russia's position, and I thought we moved beyond that conversation into, you know, whether they're morally justified in doing that or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but our judgment on their moral justification is kind of irrelevant, though. That's what the person is saying.
That is the moral relativist position.
To me, it's like,
so what?
It's a boring conversation to say, well, I understand. I mean, because I do understand where Russia's coming from, or at least I think I do. And I understand where Ukraine's coming from. So it's like, okay, so do you just not talk about it beyond that because we understand where both parties are coming from?
Yeah, but we already know that we're going to morally condemn Russia for what they've done.
Yeah, because we don't agree with them morally.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but we're watching a debate where Nick Fuentes doesn't have your position at all.
Well,
he sides with Russia morally.
Well, maybe he does. I don't watch Nick Fuentes.
Well, I know.
I have no idea what he
that's,
says. You know,
that's the conversation. But I understand. But that's why we're watching this conversation, because I think it's completely different.
But you guys seem to have real difficulty separating your moral and value judgments from like understanding of what Russia is, why it's acting, and how it is in fact a part of the problem of what America has done. I'm not saying that Russia is blameless or anything like that, but also America is also not blameless.
Well, we're articulating the same information about America's role here as you. You're just saying that that role justifies Russia's action, and we're saying that it doesn't. So
no, again,
but I think this is
when you say justifies, you're talking in a moral framework.
I know. Yes, you're just.
Yeah, but that's not proper.
Okay, well, I think this is where we're getting confused, because when you say like America has to share the blame to us, that sounds like there's a moral component that you're adding.
Yes, blame.
You're not just simply saying
component.
It's like every action has a reaction component.
Well, I mean, it's a causal component, right? Mm-hmm. America's actions are part of the causal chain of events, right? And
yeah, maybe
there is moral burden here on your part, right? Again, Ukrainians are currently dying because they've got the fantasy in their head that America's going to ride to the rescue.
Well, we disagree about whether that's true or not.
Well, I think that's probably true, but I might be wrong. You know, who knows? But I think that probably is true, and I think there probably is some moral burden there. I don't think America is blameless and has done nothing wrong, but then I don't think America is a great Satan either, and it's definitely a preferable option to Russia. But this is what makes America's weakness in this regard. When hard power is enforced, like this is what makes America's weakness kind of suck. But the question is how, you know, wars begin when you will but don't end when you please, and so I can understand why America wouldn't, but then that's basically an admission that Eastern Europe is Russia's backyard and America has no business being there.
Triple J for $20. Triple J for $20. I think Sargon is trying to make a real politic argument while Sitch and Adam are making a moral argument. Both arguments can be true at once. It can be true that Putin can be geopolitically justified and morally unjustified. Yes, that is the case.
Yeah, I don't think we contended that, though.
I think that the Russians would see it as being morally justified, though.
Right. That's what we're talking about.
Yes, of course. They see it as self-defense, so therefore they are morally justified. 95 Keith for $20 says, can we outlaw you only think this way because you're American argument. Yes, we can't outlaw that. That's we've already outlawed it. Don't make us make us join NATO. Oh wait.
Honestly, there is an element of privilege to being an English-speaking person. You've had a much easier history than some other peoples in the world.
I agree. Yeah.
There you go. Ivan Petrescu for $20 says, it's noteworthy that all of Sargon's arguments are vague, moralizing, navel-gazing. He hasn't addressed a single point that was made in the stream to this point.
Well,
I'll give Sargon some more credit.
I don't think I've made any moralizing arguments.
Okay. Alex Time for $20 says, we did respect Russia. Remember a little thing called the Cold War? Then they lost and became a kleptocracy. Fuck that. Fuck what they think about themselves. Isn't that your big problem with SJWs, Carl?
Yeah, but SJWs aren't going to be killing Ukrainians and threatening nuclear war and things like that. All these things are questions of scale.
Okay, well, here's a question. Let's imagine a crazy hypothetical where Putin is actually a transgender lady who's teaching all his children in Russia drag queen story time, and he's the embodiment of woke neo-Marxism. Like, does that change anything then?
No, because the thing that changes things is the scale of Russia's nuclear arsenal.
Right. Okay.
If there wouldn't be much contention here, really, because you guys got to remember European history before nuclear weapons, right? It was just armies invading all over the place
constantly. Yeah, I know.
The Russians have seized Paris. The French have sieged Moscow, taken Moscow, right? Mm-hmm. So giant armies marching across Europe is just totally normal. And if this was the pre-nuclear time, it would be like, okay, we'll just raise an army and go fucking destroy them.
If Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, would you be in favor of us getting involved? The U.S. getting involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the Americans will not have a problem actually destroying the Russian army, right? That's not the issue. Is not your manpower, your capability.
No,
the issue is the
nuclear
Russian
submarines.
Yeah, exactly. And don't they have like 1,000 nukes or something like that? It's a really high number, and so it's just like fuck. And so if it was conventional, then do it, and it would probably be better, it would probably be better to liberalize Russia by force, like Japan, instantly. But I don't think that's an option. So there's no point putting it on the table.
Someone in our chat, I don't know if it's true or not. Someone in our chat says they live in Kiev and they're not surrounded at the moment. So
no. Okay. Well, great. Good.
95 key.
Who knows,
95 Keat for $20 says, defending the invasion of a foreign country that desired peace and the death of its civilians to own the libs. And a little emoji with the sunglasses.
I like this one, even though it's for $5. I'm not sure I understand it, but the Real Hydro PX for $5 says, Adam and Sitch have made pussy their god. So they are controlled by morality. If anyone watches the left news, they use morality to control. There you go.
Based.
We watch a bunch of left news. That's all we watch. I'm a huge Rachel Maddow fan. She is. She's.
What's Rachel Maddow's take on all of this, by the way?
I don't watch any of that shit. Come on.
She's probably frothing at the mouth, demanding we nuke Russia first.
I would not be surprised. Yeah. I would not be surprised.
Become the Knight for $20 says, Tornado Sargon coming in hot, decimating my free will and these legendary levels of spin. A lot of spin.
There you go. Bishop Cruz for $20 says, Sargon's thinking here is so flawed. He wants to blame the U.S. for everything, but admits that Russia is wrong. By his own rationale, if Russia cannot change, then the world would be better bombing them from existence. I think that's kind of what you were saying, though.
He wants to blame the U.S. for everything, but admits Russia's wrong. Well, hang on a second. That's not me blaming the U.S. for everything, then, is it?
Well, no, because
you're saying Russia did nothing wrong, then I would be blaming everything on the U.S.
Well, no, because it's sort of like as you're conceptualizing Russia as like not having agency, sort of in this situation.
Well, no, it has agency, but it's predictable what Russia's going to do. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, the narrative from honestly your guy's side is very much. It comes across very much that America has done nothing wrong here, and I think America has done something wrong here. But I also think Russia is obviously doing things wrong. It's Russia.
Of course, there's an argument about. Anyone can have this argument about what is wrong is from the eye of the beholder, and we're classifying as countries wanting to become part of the more European or American style things is not wrong. and Russia is. So I mean, it's all a definitions game.
But not necessarily. It's about the level of argument you're making. Like, what layer are you making an argument on? Because I mean, morally, you'd be like, well, yeah, of course, we want everywhere to be liberal democracies, right? But
do we?
If that comes with, well,
Carl, I feel like we're making progress. Say that again. But I like that. One more time.
Clip it.
But do it like you mean it. I want it with gusto. Of course we want the world to be liberal democracies. Say it with me.
But this is just my moral intuition. Right?
Of course. But ours is objectively correct.
Yeah, but the reality is Putin shelling cities now. Well, probably, I don't know if he's actually shelling cities, but he's like, Putin invading another country.
This is why I
and so my desire for a liberal democracy anywhere has to gel with reality.
Do you think the people, though, do you think the people inherently want that over other systems? Because I feel like they do.
Yeah. I mean, there are some people, like, I don't know. I don't really know. I would need to spend a lot of time talking to Ukrainians, like looking up Ukrainian opinions on liberal democracy.
Right. We wouldn't want to do it by force. We wouldn't want to roll into Kiev with a bunch of tanks. But
also I don't think like essentially bribing them into it is a good way of doing it either. So, I mean, like there's an aspect of like,
well, they're not just bribing them. Like the people say, oh, we want what they have. We want to live that kind of life.
Right.
I mean, it's not like bribing them.
But the thing is, I think we also need to be realistic about the problems that our culture creates as well. Right? They're not the same problems.
We're getting somewhere.
Well, yeah, but like if Ukraine or Lithuania or whatever country, becomes more Americanized or Europeanized, like they're not going to become a mirror image. They're going to have their own cultural problems and their own solutions that we don't have.
Yeah, but there is. I don't think you can underestimate, and I say this is like a province of the American empire, the cultural empire. You can't underestimate the amount of influence that America has, and it really is cancerous in some ways. So I can understand why there are like the Nick Fuentes who are like, no, America bad, right?
What ways? Just so we have it on the record.
Social justice, mate. Black Lives Matter. Like all of this cancerous American bullshit is tearing our societies apart. Like, so to say that this doesn't come with it is wrong.
What would we call that? Like too much empathy?
Well, American leftist culture, however you want to describe it. But these things come with the Americans.
But does that mean money? Like if we were having this conversation in 2008, I mean, that wasn't really a thing in 2008.
Yeah, I know. So we wouldn't have known this was going to sprout up, but it has sprouted up,
right?
And it is cancerous, and it is.
I mean, I agree with you that it's definitely cancerous.
I know. But this is the thing: we can't. I don't think we should have such a. I mean, we shouldn't have such a blind view of liberal democracies to say it's good in every case, because there are downsides that we're struggling with right now, and we don't have a solution.
No, but I don't think anyone has a solution.
No, but
because it seems like the other solution is, let's become fascist again, which I don't think is a solution.
I've seen.
I know that's not your position. I'm just saying that seems to be some of the position I hear from the Nick Fuentes camp.
Well, who cares what Nick Fuentes says? Like, I've never watched his shows. I mean,
that's fine. I'm just saying I agree with you. There's this issue. There's this problem with the woke shit and communism spreading up in liberal democracy. I just haven't heard a reasonable solution from anyone yet that isn't just like tear it all down.
Squeeze Louise. Just
as a quick thing, I think this is why I think it's worth actually reconsidering conservatism. Like there is actually value in it, and it can actually form a moral bulwark against social justice. It just articulates its own arguments really terribly.
Squeeze Louise, High Lord of something. I don't know. It's cut off.
Shitposts.
High Lord of shitposts for $20.
Says the real solution to the Ukraine crisis is for America to go full Rome and subjugate all of Russia. It's especially win-win for Sitch, because then we'll have a state even worse than Florida. We can all mock.
Yeah.
Well, this is what Patton wanted to do, wasn't it? Just have it out with the Russians after defeating the Germans.
There you go.
They should have done it, really.
Myron Phillips for $20. Unleash the elephant, Adam. Sargon is saying, don't provoke scary Russia. You might make the mean man angry.
It's too late for that.
I'm trying to work better on my elephant, but Sargon and Sitch, I mean, both of them got really triggered, and I was kind of calm, cool, and collected.
Listen, I don't. I feel bad. I like Sargon. I really actually liked our conversation. I thought it was interesting. So I apologize that it got so heated throughout the
I mean,
conversation.
it's my fault. I came in hot-headed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of did.
But the thing is, I've been listening for like an hour to you two being American. I'm like, oh, fuck's sake.
Listen, America's the greatest country that's never done anything wrong in the history of
It sounds like sour grapes.
You're
Sargon.
just
Jeez.
mad that we broke away from your empire so many hundreds of years ago and became better. Okay.
And that's why I'm pro-America, right? But there are times and places where a bit more of a nuanced and broader opinion
Never.
is welcomed.
That sounds like commie shit to me. Okay.
Yeah. Nuance.
So I know Counterpoints was like dying to come in and yell at you. I don't know if you want that or not, but
Well, it's midnight and I gotta go to work tomorrow. But
And we
can-
got a bunch of other stuff to do too.
Yeah, we can do it
do you
another time.
have more? Are we all caught up on super chats? I don't know. I think you were reading
no,
from the top.
We're not caught up, but
Let's do them so we can
get for a
get
couple
so
more
Sargon
if
can
that's
get
right.
out of here. Yeah.
Rob Walker for $20 says Sargon is totally right here. What we know we will do does not matter. Russia's views and interpretations are what drive their actions. If they feel scared, they will act in their interest.
Yeah.
The Justice 35 for $20 says Sargon is just a modern Chamberlain. Quote, peace in our time, and Putin just wants his Libstrom. Only a moron sides with a burglar who's afraid of people installing anti-burglar alarms. Return to the Fuentes Destiny debate.
This is ironic because I was on Mauler's stream a week or so ago, and they were like, "What do you think of it?" I was like, "Well, basically, if you're gonna talk big, you should go in and smack the Russians." And they're like, "Oh God, we don't think we should do that." It's for fuck's sake, then don't fucking talk big, right? He's up the ante. He's using hard power. Okay, if you're not going to use hard power, then shut the fuck up.
Right.
Just accept that they're going to do what they're going to do, and you're not going to do shit. You just sit there holding your dick in your hand, doing nothing.
Okay.
And now I'm Neville Chamberlain. Jesus.
There you go.
What if we nuke Putin's palace?
First strike.
I mean, we
The
would
liberal
kill
view from Adam.
we would kill a limited number of people that way, and I think it would send a strong message to Putin. He's
I
put a
don't
lot of
think
money
you
into
could
that
arrive in
palace.
time.
I'm getting their counterpoints. Don't worry. Vosh fan for 30 Canadians says Sargon saying the options are 1, start the nuke war, 2, let Ukrainians die fighting impossible odds, 3, NATO agrees to stop expanding, or 4, Ukraine surrenders and returns to Russia equals no more deaths. That's it. Pick one of those.
Yeah, that's basically it.
The expert layman for $20 says, if you've ever had to deal with an abused animal, one that's aggressive and easily provoked, you have a hard decision to make. Grant it considerable leeway or put it down. There is no middle ground.
Yeah.
I guess that was your argument, yeah.
And man, I'm telling you, man, like it must have really sucked to be Russia for a long, long time.
Right.
Really much. I'm genuinely sympathetic to what the Russian people have been through. And I actually don't begrudge them the national pride. I think there is pride in having endured what Russia has endured.
Why are you conflating, or maybe not you, but just people in particular, why are people conflating our position in just understanding and analyzing it from what I admit is a moral perspective to advocating us sending troops in?
I mean, it seems that moral imperatives demand action.
Is that it? So
But I mean, we're giving them billions of dollars, training, weapons. I mean, does that count for nothing?
It's not that it doesn't count for nothing, but it's obviously insufficient.
Mm-hmm. Well, we don't know. I mean, again, we don't know yet. Really.
Well, sure, we don't. Again, all I can go from really, I think the most telling thing is Zelensky looking desperate. So,
well, I mean, did you see Putin's last speech? He was kind of coming off way different than he did at the beginning of the conflict.
I haven't actually had time to watch it. The stadium one, right? I've only seen clips of it.
Yeah. His everything is different. His tone, the way he looks,
I'll watch it tomorrow. I haven't had time to watch it yet.
Counterpoints for $20 says, why was integration with Russia not possible? Why could Russia not achieve the same goals with diplomacy? Are liberal principles local or universal? And if they're local, why can't they be promoted universally?
It's a big question. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think the best thing would have been to have brought Russia in, accept them for what they are, and slowly begin the process of subverting them into democracy.
Get the worm tongue in there on Putin's side.
No, literally. Yeah, literally just, allowed things to get better in Russia. like help things, actively help things to get better in Russia. Like essentially, like court the Russians. You know, look, actually, and the thing is, there's a kind of brotherly way that this could have been done. You know, we can be like, okay, fellow Europeans, you know, you've been oppressed by the evil communists, but you can join your European brethren in the realm of this thing. And if it had been done with an eye to saying, well, look, Russia's a great power and we want to see you become a peer, right? Then we could have had moral arguments that would have had weight and pull with Russia. And I'm sure that this has been tried, but like, you know, I'm no expert or anything. But this I think would have been just been a better way of approaching it than being like, Russia bad, Russia bad, Russia bad.
Right.
And that's all Americans say. And it's like, but they're not. They're damaged, you know. From our perspective, they're a damaged people.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about that.
I don't mean to
exact
sound
thing.
condescending there either, but like that's how I view it.
I was thinking about that exact thing the other day. You know, if that was feasible for America or Europe to do something like that. And I was trying to think, has America tried to do something like that? And I kind of came upon, well, I mean, it's kind of what we're trying to do with Saudi Arabia. And I don't think it's working really, though.
Oh, well, you say that, but I mean, they're letting women drive now. So,
well, okay, there you go. Maybe
small steps in the right direction.
Baby steps. So, I mean, I hope, you know, what you're saying would be a feasible alternative. I'm not sure it would have been because of the way Putin is essentially running the country. Like, I'm not sure Russia could ever have joined the EU or
well,
NATO
I don't
or
think Russia
something
could have
like
joined
that.
the EU, but like,
You know,
essentially,
or whatever, some equivalent, you know.
Essentially, we should have basically admitted that Russia's the big boy in that neighborhood, right? And so, you know, rather than taking all of his friends, which you know he wouldn't be beating up all of those friends. He just would have had them hanging around him. You know, and we should have respected that. But I think it's too late now. So,
Yeah, obviously.
Kabumo for $20. What's Sargon's take on the failure of the Budapest memorandum, where Ukraine gave up its massive stockpile of Soviet nukes for assurance that Britain, France, China, Germany, Russia, and the U.S.?
I mean, it's making the argument against gun control really strong, isn't it? You know?
Well, they had the financial incentives were against them. Nukes are very expensive to maintain, and they actually
But
also, had you had nukes, you probably wouldn't have been invaded. So.
Right. Yeah. After this, no country is ever going to give up its
Yeah.
nukes.
Yeah.
Totally.
I don't think it's wise.
Hip-sized cat. Go ahead. Oh.
Marfin for $5 says, Sargon, we already tried to bring Russia into the fold with the former president Boris Yeltsin, but Putin took control and rejected closer U.S. relations. I mean, that's my understanding of the situation.
I think it's about on people's terms. I think there are certain terms that America demands that perhaps shouldn't have been
It's always
made.
America's fault.
No, I'm not. No.
It is
not-
everything. It's always America's fault.
Well, I mean,
say it
I
louder
think-
for me, Adam. Say it louder for me. I
First of
wanna hear
all,
it again.
first
It's
of all,
always
America
America's
did
fault.
nothing wrong. But I think that's probably correct in that America wants. It says, okay, if we're going to have these positive relations, I mean, it depends what they are. Because we have positive relations with Saudi Arabia, and we don't expect them to be
Exactly, because of
fucking
dependence.
moral, right? So,
But and this is the thing, like there's always another standard applied to Russia, it seems, and like I think we should have just treated Russia like Saudi Arabia.
I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm not totally opposed to that idea. I'm not even totally opposed to thinking that Clinton was wrong in how he handled, the early NATO acceptance of those countries. But the difference, I guess, of course, was just we're not afraid of Saudi Arabia taking over the world like we were with Russia.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I think
Yeah,
that was
but
the concern.
I think that Russia's a dying empire. Like it's like, I mean, you know the sort of vital statistics of Russia. It's
Right.
deeply unimpressive. Like I just don't see how they could conquer Europe. I just don't see how they could take over the world. I just don't
Well, if they
think
took over, I mean, if Russia, for the last 20 years, so imagine NATO didn't exist, and they started soft powering or hard powering, taking back, all of Eastern Europe up to Germany, up to wherever EU starts. I mean, I don't think they would be a dying empire right now.
maybe, but I don't know. The problem that I think the entire West has is that it's a dying empire as well.
Shame.
No. Honestly, I'm put very much in mind of the Roman Empire and the Sassanid Empire at the eve of Islam.
All right.
You're just basing that off of the birth rates?
Not just the birth rates, just like economic stagnation, cultural decline, like a general listlessness. Like,
I mean, the economy was like exploding pre-COVID, so I don't know if that's
say again.
Pre-COVID, the economy was blowing up. We weren't really in economic stagnation.
I think that our way of measuring that isn't accurate, really, because like house prices are through the fucking roof. You know, real wages have been stagnant for a long time now.
Oh man!
So, like, you know, if we're, you know, it depends. Like, wealth inequality is a real problem.
We got a birdie bro here. I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Carl.
It's not that they're wrong on these things, right? And I think these aren't the signs of healthy civilization. So, like, business centralization was increasing before COVID, and then boom, you know. Massive.
Yeah, no, I mean, the neoliberal economic way of running things is definitely needs to be fixed and
exactly. And so I think that we're a kind of exhausted empire as well. It's just that they're weaker, you know. And so if, you know, when the forces of Islam rise up, not Islam, but, you know, whatever represents the Mohammedans in this analogy, something new comes along that no one expects and just starts conquering, we're gonna find it difficult to resist, I think.
Hippo-sized cat, the most dangerous of all predators, for $20. Says Sargon's argument is that America, Kyle Rittenhouse, provoked Putin, the protesters, when they crossed state lines into Ukraine, Kenosha, and brandished their NATO AR-15. So this is America, Kyle's fault. I still love you, Sargon.
I tell you what, I'm waiting for NATO Rittenhouse to start shooting. This is NATO Rittenhouse if it just laid down like Vosh asked him to,
submit to the mob,
took the beating.
Why? You were against Vosh on submit to the mob. Carl, what changed?
I'm against submitting to the mob now. It's just you are submitting to the mob.
Saying
You're
America
not firing any shots.
But Ukraine's not submitting to the mob.
Yeah, they're not submitting at all.
They're fight.
Yeah, but Ukraine can't win this. I don't think.
Okay. Is it better to go down fighting for something worth fighting for, or just capitulate?
I mean, it depends what's happening. I don't think Russia is an existential threat to Ukraine, right? Russia's not going to annihilate Ukraine. It's not going to destroy Ukraine. It's not going to change it into a fundamentally different country. If they were coming in with like a weird religion and, you know, a whole new set of institutions,
they were going to tranny their kids, then, you know, we'd have a conversation, you know.
Yeah, okay. Stop strengthening Fuentes' position.
Is rooting for Ukraine immoral?
No, of course not.
Okay. Fondue for $20 says, so Sargon's answer is to give Ukraine nuclear weapons. I can read. I can.
I wouldn't have given them up if I were Ukraine.
Yeah, but we couldn't give them nukes now. I mean,
we can't even give them the jets. They're too. I was wondering, can a private citizen give them the jets? Just send Elon.
Well, I thought the issue with the jets was that they wouldn't be able to fly them out of Ukraine. They'd have to fly them out of Poland. And
yes, and Poland doesn't want to do it. Yeah.
Well, and then it's like, well, you know, Russia can attack Poland and triggers NATO and all that shit.
Yeah.
Malachi Constant for $20 says Russia has been invading its neighbors for centuries before NATO or the U.S. even existed. The NATO excuse is a laughable, ahistorical nonsense. I mean, I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
But
I think that's it, isn't it? Are we good?
C. Hennessy for $20 says, I may have missed the beginning of Sargon coming on, but did Sitch explain the fleeing Putin theory? I think it holds a lot of free will. Thank you. I can't have very prosperous neighbors that were once dependent on you. Bad optics, A-team.
I do think that's a very strong argument, by the way. But that also seems to create an argument for Russia to start invading places.
Sure.
Yeah, but not a moral justification
for Putin, really,
for it.
from how he's kind of his power base. But
sorry, say it again.
But not a moral justification for it. That's the point I was making. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, if you're the Russians, you might think it would be immoral to let your country fall to chaos and anarchy and the civil war or whatever comes after Putin. So
that's always a $1 million question. What comes after Putin?
Yeah.
And if the answer is blood in the streets, then maybe it'd be better to have blood in the streets of a different country.
Sure, but unless it's blood in the streets and then something better. I mean, that's always the gamble of any revolution, isn't it?
Blood in the streets and then subjugation.
Fucking awful.
Blood
Except
in the streets.
For the American Revolution, which was ultra-based.
Fair enough.
Try cyclotron for $20.
No, I agree with you. English exceptionalism. I'm with you.
Try cyclotron for $20, says Sargon. It's just the typical angsty proto-American. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
We forgot to call you proto-American.
Oh, yeah. Okay, fair.
So Bishop Cruz for $20 says Sargon's view of Russia is naive. The assumption that sans NATO Russia would have been happy with former vassals acting on their own volition, NATO or not. Russia has a history of invading nations long before NATO.
Well, obviously.
Now, no more Sargon super chats. We've got to wrap it up. So go ahead, Sargon.
Right. Okay. But yeah, no, I'm not saying Russia's a good boy didn't do nothing or anything. It's more a case of limiting the scope of what they do and keeping it soft power. I think would be better than not letting them. Well, we are letting them engage in hard power, but like I just think it would have been a more productive way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
maybe I don't know. We'll never know that answer.
Yeah, exactly. It's too late there. But yeah, right. So if that's the last one, I'm going to head off.
The last one is this. Rico Zorro for $20 says, as an American, I like my morals with cheese, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah, I like that. Never be ashamed.
If only you had cheese in America, though. Hey?
We have cheese. It's just not the American cheese. Okay.
It's just imported from other countries because our cheese is a weird plastic film.
It's imported from Italy or Switzerland or something. Yeah.
I'll tell you
what the American dream's about. Okay, we take the better
Dutch cheese is just the best fucking thing in the world.
Dutch cheese.
Oh yes. So
I don't know if what is Dutch cheese?
Gouda is the one I like. But they've got a bunch, but like Gouda's just so good. It's like creamy and like.
Oh, are you saying Gouda, but in some weird British way?
Oh my god,
Gouda! Jesus Christ.
It is.
I lived in Germany for 8 years. We used to go to Holland. Apparently, it's pronounced Gouda.
Listen, in America, we say Gouda. Okay.
Yeah, in America, you say a lot of things wrong.
We say everything right because America says it, so it has to be right.
Right, okay. Well, thanks for having me on. Again, sorry I came in so hot.
No, it's okay. Thanks.
We still love you.
Thanks for coming on.
I love you guys too. But I will watch next week. I hope some of this sinks in.
Mm-hmm. Nah.
I feel that we've come to a very productive understanding, actually. Like,
sure.
Okay. Big pause from Sitch there. But anyway, thanks for having me on.
We've come to a positive understanding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me on. I'll see you guys later.
See you later.
Take care, Carl.
Easy.
Take care.
Now I have to figure out how to leave this.
Yes. Good job kicking Quackademic's ass.
Thank you. I like AA. That's the thing. I like both of you guys, and it's really fucking frustrating that you couldn't talk to each other. Like
what do you mean? He couldn't talk to us. We each other. There's no each other in this.
I don't think you can hear what he's saying either. That's the thing, because I think he's talking in a way that you guys don't. It doesn't resonate with you. You don't get it.
Judging from your conversation, you're right. I didn't understand why he was dying on this insane hill that he was dying on in your guys' conversation.
But yeah, he
didn't explain it, and no one did explain it.
Yeah, I'll see if I can do another hangout with him and try and get to the bottom of it. But anyway, take it easy.
Okay,
take care.
You later. Well, that was fun.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the debate last night about Ukraine and Russia. A couple of things were said that I want to address, so let's see if I can boil down 7 hours of bullshit into something pristine in under 300 seconds. I'm feeling pretty confident. So before this situation even kicked off, I had no idea of the history of the situation. I just looked at this and saw there was heavy one-sidedness by the mainstream. So I went rogue. I stayed away from that altogether. I pretty much had 3 sources. Professor John Mearsheimer, journalist Vladimir Posner, and Chris Hedges. And I'll link some of the videos that I was watching. First off, to Sargon in the chat, Sargon defending my position. Thank you for that, sir, for which he took an avalanche of petty name-calling. Not a good look to call very likely the sharpest person in the audience an idiot. By the way, you look like spastic lemmings, but whatever floats your boat. So early on, we were called Putin apologists right out of the gate, which does not help the situation, by the way. You look like an antagonistic asshole. But the longer the debate went on, it was very obvious it is just two sides talking past each other because they have a fundamentally different perspective of how they view global politics. From my perspective, I was looking at it historically of, can you envision America being seen as the aggressor from a Russian perspective? And the answer is yes. Americans cannot conceptualize a worldview where they are not the bad guy. That is fundamentally an American point of view. So if I look at it, I see America shutting off its own oil production. Then it buys from Russia, which is made by Gazprom, which is nationalized, so that fuels their military. You've been expanding NATO, which was to protect against an entity that doesn't even exist anymore. You call yourself spreaders of democracy while you topple regimes left, right, and frickin' center. You claim to give a shit about defending the Ukraine's sovereignty, which is hilarious considering that has not historically been America's foreign policy. Protecting them against autocratic Russia, while you buy Saudi and Russian oil from autocratic regimes. Your politicians are aligned with China. The guy in charge is called Beijing Biden, for heaven's sakes. And you think sending politicians who aren't even bothered about rooting out corruption in your own country into lands with even more corruption than your own, under the guise they're going to root out corruption in a new place. Am I the only one that looks at that and thinks that is extremely idealistic and a clusterfuck of contradictions? At the very best, America's foreign policy looks schizophrenic. But people seem to think that I was advocating for appeasement and sacrificing the sovereignty of Ukraine to the great Russian beast. First off, none of these people know what the hell Putin is after, and anyone who says they do is full of shit. So please spare me your self-righteous smugness, you twats. There's this ridiculous take that any talks with Putin that does not end up with him being ass-blasted to Mars is somehow seen as surrendering. It is very bizarre. So allow me to put on my tinfoil hat for a moment. I think Russia being encircled by an American-led force who's lied to them for years on end. Ukraine is not brought into NATO, but it's still militarized to the hills, provokes Russia into a confrontation, and the whole world bands together to weaken Russia. And the US gets to up its war machine again after laying somewhat dormant for many a year now. So Ukraine was used as bait to pull the Russians into aggressions. Because I honestly do not think any US politician who is pushing for this interventionist crap gives an ounce of an ass about the sovereignty or the people of Ukraine. I don't. And that's just my 2 cents. So now we have 2 sides. It's the defend the sovereignty, saber-rattling neocon position versus opposing this, or heaven forbid staying the hell out of it altogether, which makes you a Putin apologetic. You do realize there is also Russian people involved in this. It's not simply Putin's regime. This is very frustrating. How in the hell, after the last 3 years of everything we've had to endure, there are so few people who can look at the entire media apparatus all against one thing and not arouse any suspicion? They just downloaded the latest version of things social media told me to give a fuck about. It's insane. So my take on it was this. You're already in the thick of it. There's 2 parties already engaged. This is not a bloody regime-changing scenario. Yes, I find your sovereignty-simping idealism very heartwarming now. May we please step away from the childishness and realize you are walking ever closer to the possibility of nuclear annihilation? Is there any chance, perhaps, that we can have adults discuss a way to contain the situation and not risk escalating it to the point where it spreads out over the damn Ukrainian borders? I do not have an answer, but I am a tad skeptical given historical precedent, and there's a chance of nukes being involved. Oh, but I am called an idiot for recognizing this position. I'll tell you what, if those dim-witted pricks can come up with a more intelligent solution other than calling me stupid, then I shall be glad to hear it. Until then, I will continue condescendingly snickering, and if you don't like it, eat a dick. Because let's be brutally honest about all of this for a moment, shall we? If this was relegated into a small news space, or we didn't have social media and a massive corporate conglomerate pushing politics, I suspect very few people would give a damn about any of this in the grand scheme of things. And that's all for today.